The big power closest to Celestial River was the Haoyu sect. The second was the Ice and Snow Mountain village. Therefore, in Celestial River, there were always plenty of disciples of the Haoyu sect and of the Ice and Snow Mountain village. The big power closest to Celestial River was the Haoyu sect. The second was the Ice and Snow Mountain village. Therefore, in Celestial River, there were always plenty of disciples of the Haoyu sect and of the Ice and Snow Mountain village. In Celestial River, they could find all the things they needed. They obviously enjoyed spending time there. A year before, the holy courtyard of Shuiyu had been inaugurated, the Yunhai sect had been annihilated, and at the same time, the Haoyu sect and the Ice and Snow Mountain village had to give up many of their outstanding disciples to send them to study at the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. In a year, the biggest sects of the country had completely shaken. For example, now the best core disciple of the Haoyu sect was Jiang Shan and the second was Leng Yu aka the Blade Master. Amongst the Ice and Snow Mountain village, Bing Yuan was one of the best talents. All of them were illustrious disciples, they were rising stars. Amongst all of them, the Blade Master was particularly amazing. He was even more monstrous than Jiang Shan. Leng Yu's blade was piercingly cold, the cold pierced to the bones like needles. Leng Yu rarely needed a second blade strike in his battles, one was enough to kill his opponents. Very often, he didn't even need to take out his blade to kill his opponents. The Blade Master's blade had reached perfection. It was said that, when he had the power of the third Ling Qi layer, he had understood how to control blade force. Then when he had the strength of the sixth Ling Qi layer, he had learned how to use energy attacks, and these days he was extremely strong and had broken through to the eighth Ling Qi layer. However, with his energy attacks, he was already able to defeat cultivators of the ninth Ling Qi layer. People who dared to fight against him were rare. Leng Yu's blade didn't appear randomly. If he took his blade out, it meant he was going to kill. Therefore, in a short time within the last 6 months, he had gained the nickname the Blade Master. Everybody knew the 8 high officials of Shuiyu. Many people thought that, in the future, the Blade Master could become one of them. On the central road of Celestial River, there was the Celestial Mountain Restaurant. Many people were having a break there and drinking some alcohol. At that moment, a silhouette stepped onto the wooden floor of the restaurant. When the people in the restaurant saw that silhouette, everybody went quiet. There is some blade energy. That blade energy is so cold. The crowd was stupefied. Everybody was staring at the person who had just entered the restaurant. That person looked like an ordinary young man. That young man didn't look like a noble cultivator. He didn't seem normal either. The only noticeable thing was that he was carrying a blade on his back. It was an ancient one, it was even partly rusted. People were trying to guess how old that blade really was. Everybody was staring at that common and ordinary young man and remained silent. It was because he was releasing an extremely strong and powerful blade chi which seemed like it could explode at any moment and kill people. When that young man looked at the crowd, they had the impression that his eyes were like blades. The young man came in and indifferently glanced at the crowd. Everybody could feel the sharpness of his blade. Everybody was avoiding looking into his eyes, they didn't dare. But at that moment the young man stopped. His blade-like eyes started looking at someone. That person was wearing a bronze mask and was releasing an incredibly brutal blade chi. That person was like him, a blade cultivator. But that person's blade was a brutal blade. His was a sharp blade. The young man smiled as he found the situation amusing and then stopped looking at him, went away and chose a place to sit. Because of him, the atmosphere in the restaurant had become quite oppressive. "Ba Dao, how strong is he?" asked Lin Feng to Ba Dao in a low voice. They were sitting at a table on the second floor and were next to the banister. "Very strong, I cannot defeat him, my strength and blade chi is not as strong as his," replied Ba Dao and then continued. "He has broken through to the 8th Ling Qi layer." "Oh," said Lin Feng while nodding. He had, of course, noticed that that young man was stronger than Ba Dao. Considering the blade energy that he released and in view of the fact that he had broken through to the 8th Ling Qi layer, he could probably already use her energy attacks and was at the point of condensing pure qi. Everybody could sense his strong blade energy. He wasn't releasing as much blade energy as he could though. He was actually very relaxed yet was releasing such a powerful blade energy, as if he couldn't control it. It was not under his control, because he had not mastered how to successfully condense his pure qi. Small amounts of the pure qi he was attempting to condense would be released along with each heartbeat. Coupled with the fact that he had the strength of the 8th Ling Qi layer, He could easily kill people of the 9th Ling Qi layer. Besides, people who were as strong as him, yet as young as him, were extremely rare. But he is too arrogant. He cannot rival you, said Ba Dao, which made Lin Feng smile. Shamelessly boasting, joked someone at the same time. That voice came from the table beside Lin Feng and his friends. At that table there was 4 people, 2 boys and 2 girls. The one who had said these words was a young girl. She was looking at Lin Feng and Ba Dao. She then said, sounding ice cold, "You're really shamelessly boasting. You really are ridiculous. Lung Yu is my fellow disciple from the Hao Yu sect. He's extremely strong and has amazing natural talent. His nickname is the Blade Master. In the future, he will be the same as Chu Zhanpeng, the high official of our sect. He will become one of the 8 high officials. Who do you think you are?" These 4 people were acting extremely arrogant. They really thought they were above everyone else. Besides, they were disciples of the Hao Yu sect, which is why they were proud of the Blade Master and Chu Zhanpeng. The Blade Master? What an arrogant name, replied Ba Dao. He immediately added, "But I've never heard of him before." The name was as sharp as a blade. Blade Master was indeed an arrogant nickname. Gotcha. A cutting sound emerged in the atmosphere. The banister next to Lin Feng's table was broken. The place where it had been cut was neat and clean, as if it had been cut with an extremely sharp blade. Lin Feng turned around and looked at the first floor over the banister. He saw that Blade Master was sitting at his table and drinking some alcohol. At that moment, the Blade Master put his glass down onto his table and said while sounding indifferent, "Next time that you open your mouth, be a little bit more respectful." He sounded calm and didn't try to hide his arrogance. He definitely deserves his nickname. He's extremely powerful. I didn't even see him take his blade out, thought some people. Some young girls were looking at him with sparkling eyes. If only they could marry such a young man, that would be wonderful. Ba Dao stood up. Some brutal qi was emerging from his body. "Sit down," said Lin Feng, sounding indifferent. Ba Dao was surprised. He immediately sat down again, yet still released some cold qi. "Drink some alcohol," said Lin Feng calmly. Ba Dao grabbed his glass, had a sip, and then his glass broke between his fingers. Ba Dao was a slave but had been given to the arena because he was too disobedient. He had ended up with Lin Feng, who had given him freedom. But Ba Dao was still aggressive and had a strong personality. "That guy is overestimating his own abilities," joked the Blade Master. Ba Dao was getting angry, but Lin Feng and Meng Qing were very calm. These words weren't affecting them at all, as if they hadn't even heard them. "How you sect the Blade Master," thought Lin Feng. He slightly smiled. It had been almost half a year since he had been out of the spotlight, yet it seemed like it had been 10 years. Many things had changed. For a few months, Lin Feng had stayed in the government practicing his surplus soul technique, increasing his qi condensation method and studying his memories granted to him regarding pills and weapons. However, Lin Feng had the feeling that his abilities still weren't high enough. There were too many things which he wanted to improve. Lin Feng didn't want to owe anything to Shuiyu, which was a tiny country. In the memories of the cultivator of the Zun Qi layer, there was one person that was almighty. By slightly waving his hand, he could make heaven and earth turn upside down. Reporting in from the translation cave to wish you all a Merry Christmas. When the boys and girls sitting at the table next to that of Lin Feng and his friends saw that they remained silent, they sneered at them and stopped looking at them. When the boys and girls sitting at the table next to that of Lin Feng and his friends saw that they remained silent, they sneered at them and stopped looking at them. "Brother, do you know why Lung Yu came to Celestial River?" "Of course, he came to Celestial River because of a blade," replied a boy. "Oh," smiled a young girl while looking at the others, and then said, "Lung Yu's blade skills are already so high. Are there still blades which can draw his attention? Probably must be an amazing blade." "Moonbreaking blade, it's a spiritual weapon of highest quality. What do you say?" said a young boy of the Hao Yu sect while smiling. Everybody was captivated and surprised. As expected, the Blade Master had come for the Moonbreaking blade. They had all heard that that blade was available in Celestial River at that time. Many people had come because of it. A spiritual weapon of highest quality. Not many people can get it, right? If Lung Yu is here, who will dare try and get it? Unless they want to become Lung Yu's enemies as well as the enemy of the Hao Yu sect. When the crowd heard these people talking, they all understood what they meant. They were boasting about Lung Yu so that nobody would dare to try and steal the blade. The crowd understood that they had to think carefully before trying. That girl of the Hao Yu sect knew why Lung Yu had come, so it was obviously clear that she was saying these things on purpose. The people who were with her looked proud and arrogant as well. But in the crowd, nobody dared to contradict these people. The Hao Yu sect had a certain influence in Celestial River. Besides, at that moment the Blade Master was also present. A spiritual weapon of highest quality, thought Lin Feng. He obviously knew the classification of spiritual weapons. There were ordinary weapons and spiritual weapons. Spiritual weapons could cut through iron as if it were mud. They also gave a cultivator a certain superiority during battles, and besides, they were also divided into 3 categories: low, medium and high quality. At the Yun Hai sect, Lin Feng had obtained spiritual weapons in the temple near the precipice of Zhanggu. Most of them were low and medium quality spiritual weapons, but there were also a few high quality spiritual weapons. In Shuiyu, spiritual weapons and pills, no matter what quality, were all very scarce. Seeing spiritual weapons of high quality was an extremely rare thing. There were also better weapons than spiritual weapons, mystical weapons. In Shuiyu there were very few of them. Cultivators of the Xianqi layer rarely used mystical weapons. Lin Feng had never seen any in his life. "Ba Dao, that moonbreaking blade, do you want it or not?" asked Lin Feng to Ba Dao in a low voice. Ba Dao was stupefied. Ba Dao was a blade cultivator, he obviously loved blades, how could it not want it? "I want it," said Ba Dao while nodding greedily. Ba Dao was like that, if he wanted to do something he just did it. "Alright," replied Lin Feng, sounding indifferent while nodding. He didn't add anything else. After a short while, Lung Yu put his glass onto his table, stood up and left the restaurant. After that, someone else came in and took his table. He had just left, and thus the strong blade energy had vanished. The atmosphere wasn't as oppressive anymore. "Sister, let's go too." The Hao Yu sect disciples, who were at the table next to Lin Feng, also stood up and left. After they left, Lin Feng asked Ba Dao, "Are you going to go ask where to find your new blade?" Ba Dao was surprised. He immediately stood up and walked to a table near them. He asked the people sitting there, "Where can we find the moonbreaking blade?" The 2 people sitting at the table raised their head and looked at Ba Dao. They smiled coldly and said, "You're also wondering where the moonbreaking blade is?" Boom. He had just finished talking and he released an incredible quantity of blade energy which oppressed the people who were sitting at the table. It was extremely brutal. They were shaking and looked absolutely terrified. In the Dream Pavilion. Today, there will be an auction sales at the Dream Pavilion. That person was panic-stricken and gasping with astonishment. A moment ago, Ba Dao's blade energy was unceasingly flowing towards Lung Yu, so these 2 people hadn't realized how strong Ba Dao's blade force was. At that moment, all the energy which was emerging from Ba Dao's body had fallen onto them, which gave them the impression that they would be crushed to death. What a monstrously strong blade force! That man, who was wearing a bronze mask, had already mastered blade force. "Lead the way," said Ba Dao. These people were surprised but obediently stood up. Fortunately, they had told Ba Dao the truth. If they had lied to him, he definitely would have killed them. "Alright," the person nodded in fear and led him outside of the restaurant. Lin Feng and Mengqing also stood up and followed. When the people in the restaurant saw Lin Feng and the others leave, the atmosphere became lively. Who were those people? What a strong blade energy! He is probably interested in the moonbreaking blade as well. Indeed, there was also that guy and that girl. They didn't seem like ordinary cultivators. Even though they were probably weaker than the Blade Master, they also said that they wanted the moonbreaking blade. It seems like there will be a great show soon. All sorts of comments were spreading amongst the crowd. There were even some people standing up and then leaving towards the Dream Pavilion. The rumor said that, on that day, apart from the moonbreaking blade, there were going to be 2 other treasures at the auction of the Dream Pavilion. The Dream Pavilion was one of the big marketplaces in Celestial River. It was a vast and broad place covering a huge area. Celestial River was a city which was millions of years old, and treasures were more numerous than in the Imperial City. There were new treasures being sold each day. There were some precious things which could only be acquired at the marketplace, at an auction market or through trade. At that moment, Lin Feng and his friends entered the pavilion. It was very noisy inside. In the pavilion there were all sorts of people, handsome young men who had an elegant carriage, delicate and beautiful young women, shabbily dressed old men and filthy beggars. Some people were there to sell things while some others were looking for various things. Sir, a Xian skill of high quality, are you interested? At that moment a middle-aged man walked next to Lin Feng and talked in a low voice. Lin Feng was surprised. He then smiled, shook his head and said, "I don't need it, thank you." When that middle-aged man heard Lin Feng, he didn't insist and immediately left as if nothing had happened. "What's wrong?" said Lin Feng perplexed while looking at a person near them. "Sir, it must be your first time in Celestial River." "Indeed," said Lin Feng while nodding. "No wonder," said that person as if they had suddenly understood. He continued, "Celestial River is the biggest marketplace in Shuiyu. Here, there are various methods of selling things. Goods that are on the ground are ordinary goods and inexpensive. Of course there are exceptions as well. Some of the sellers are also extremely strong cultivators and are therefore not afraid of putting the items they sell on the ground. They don't mind who would dare come and steal their things. The second way to sell things is to find people with whom you can exchange things. For example, that person a moment ago needed purity stones, which is why he was looking for someone in need of skills, who would be willing to give him purity stones in exchange. There is also a third way to sell things, and it is at the auction sales. You can auction your things in the Dream Pavilion and sell them in their auction." "Why do people exchange things with other people and don't bring them to auction sales?" asked Lin Feng confused. The fees of Dream Pavilion were quite low, and besides, they could sell things at a higher price. There are many reasons. One of them is that they only sell 10 items a day. If you want to give them things to sell, you need to give it to them 3 days in advance, and then they select the objects that they want to sell. If your thing is rejected, they give it back to you. Many people are unwilling to go through that troublesome procedure. Besides, ordinary things cannot be sold at the auction. Then, there are some people who are paranoid and don't want to show what they have to everybody else. It makes them worried. If they bring things to the auction marketplace, they feel unsafe. Therefore, they prefer going and finding someone on their own, which comes down to finding a needle in a haystack. When Lin Feng heard these words, he nodded as a sign that he had understood. Indeed, there were all sorts of possibilities. There were people who were realistic and felt good only if they had the object they were selling on themselves near them. Many people were realists. "It seems like we'll have to stay at the Dream Pavilion for a few days," thought Lin Feng. That time he had come prepared. He absolutely needed to get a few things. "Look, it's Bing Yuan, the top disciple of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village." At that moment a surprised voice spread in the air. Many people were looking in one direction. They saw a group of people being led by an ice-cold and fierce-looking man, Bing Yuan, who had joined the Ice and Snow Mountain Village after the high official Luo Shui left for the Imperial City. Lin Feng looked in the same direction as the other people and saw Bing Yuan. What a cold young man. Lin Feng looked in the same direction as the other people and saw Bing Yuan. What a cold young man. In the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, only possessors of ice and snow spirits were accepted. All the skills they practiced were ice skills. When that group of people arrived, it seemed like the atmosphere had suddenly become much colder. "Ninth Ling Qi layer," said Ba Dao. Lin Feng faintly nodded. The fact that the Yunhai sect had been annihilated wasn't a random and groundless event. 1 year before, the Yunhai sect was, indeed, the weakest of all the largest sections. It was obvious when seeing the disciples of the other sections. Bing Yuan and his friends were walking forwards. At that moment, many people were moving aside, opening a path for them. Very quickly, Bing Yuan arrived in front of Lin Feng, but the crowd noticed that Lin Feng wasn't moving aside. He was standing in the same place he was before, motionless. Many people were stupefied. Who were these audacious people? They saw that Bing Yuan and his friends wanted to pass, but these people were making them go around them. Bing Yuan frowned and some ice-cold qi moved towards Lin Feng and the two others. The atmosphere around them was surrounded by a layer of white frost. Very quickly, Lin Feng's body was surrounded by a layer of ice. Lin Feng was still standing at his initial position, looking calm and serene. An invisible strength appeared. Lin Feng's clothes were fluttering in the air. In a flash, the ice around his body completely vanished without trace, as if there hadn't been anything at all. What's going on? The crowd was astonished. In the blink of an eye, the ice around Lin Feng's body had disappeared. It seems like that person is extremely strong. No wonder that he isn't moving even though Bing Yuan is trying to pass. Thought many people at that moment. They were starting to pay attention to Lin Feng. He seemed quite mysterious. I'm Bing Yuan of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, who are you? Asked Bing Yuan to Lin Feng, sounding extremely cold. Frost was floating around his body. Lin Feng, said Lin Feng indifferently. Surprisingly, when Bing Yuan heard his name, his pupils shrank. Lin Feng. He had heard that name many times in his sect. The elders of the sect often talked about him. Half a year before, he had set a city on fire and was famous in the imperial city for all his actions. Strong cultivators who belonged to the largest sects obviously knew who he was. Lin Feng, I've never heard that name. I don't know which sect he belongs to. Thought people in the crowd. They were puzzled. They didn't know which sect had an outstanding disciple called Lin Feng, but from Bing Yuan's facial expression, they had the impression that he knew Lin Feng. He was frowning. Then Bing Yuan walked around Lin Feng. People who were with him angrily glared at Lin Feng. They were asking themselves why Bing Yuan hadn't killed him. He surprisingly dared to act so arrogantly before them. But Bing Yuan remained silent. His friends had no choice but to follow him and ignore Lin Feng. At that moment, a strong ice energy flew through the air towards Lin Feng's body. Lin Feng smiled coldly and slightly shook his hand. Ah! At that moment a horrible shriek filled the atmosphere. It came from the disciple who had just attacked Lin Feng by surprise. The arm he had used for the attack was hanging from his shoulder by a layer of skin, and cultivation had just been crippled. All the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village turned around and looked at Lin Feng with ice-cold glares. Brother, what's going on? He attacked me by surprise, said the disciple whose face was deathly pale. He was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. Attacked by surprise? Lin Feng took a step forward and released swift and fierce qi. It invaded the entire atmosphere. That person started shaking and then groaned. He was terrified. He was staring at Lin Feng and blood started flowing from his mouth. You dared kill me, said that person with a trembling voice. Immediately after, his facial muscles relaxed and he collapsed onto the person who was behind him. He had just died, yet his eyes remained open with a shocked expression. Lin Feng had just killed him in front of the group of disciples. They would have never thought he would be so daring. The crowd was astonished, dumbstruck, and fixedly staring at Lin Feng. How audacious! He had killed that disciple in front of all his fellow disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, including Bing Yuan. As if I needed to attack you by surprise, said Lin Feng, sounding indifferent. That guy had just said that Lin Feng had attacked him by surprise. Lin Feng didn't feel like wasting words, so he immediately killed him. Lin Feng was much stronger than him and was not scared of the disciples. He had dared to kill him immediately while they all watched. Had Lin Feng needed to attack him by surprise? The other guy obviously just wanted to slander Lin Feng. People in the crowd were indiscernibly nodding. Indeed, with Lin Feng's strength and courage, it was impossible for him to have attacked that guy by surprise. The disciple was just lying. Lin Feng looked indifferently at the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, and more precisely at Bing Yuan. What did they intend to do? Bing Yuan looked glum. Even though he knew that his fellow disciple had provoked Lin Feng first, Lin Feng had killed him in front of everybody else. That was a humiliation for Bing Yuan and for the Ice and the Snow Mountain Village as well. Lin Feng, it seems like you don't care about humiliating me, said Bing Yuan while releasing some cold energy. The crowd was stupefied. Did he want to fight? Why would I care about humiliating you? Replied Lin Feng, sounding cold. Since you know me, you also know my background. Now why would I need to care about humiliating you or even your entire sect? Bing Yuan was surprised. Indeed, Lin Feng was a disciple of the Yun Hai sect. The Ice and Snow Mountain Village had also contributed to the destruction of the Yun Hai sect. Its patriarch, Han Shuetian, had even personally gone there to participate. Did Lin Feng need to give him face? It seems like Bing Yuan knows Lin Feng. It's just that we don't know him. We have to remember that name, thought the people in the crowd. Lin Feng surprisingly dared contradict Bing Yuan. It meant that he was probably extraordinarily strong, yet they had never heard his name. That was very strange. Bing Yuan, brother, kill him. Yes, brother. He killed our fellow disciple. Kill him. Each and every single disciple of the Ice and Snow Village Mountain was furious. Lin Feng was too audacious. He had killed their fellow disciple and was still acting arrogantly. They were furious and wanted to kill him. "Kill me? Are you not done talking shit?" said Lin Feng while glancing at the disciple. Lin Feng was provoking them to try and kill him. He was extremely aggressive. He was inviting these people to attack him and see the results. Their facial expressions were hideous. They didn't dare attack him though. Lin Feng had just slightly moved his hand and killed their fellow disciple. Besides, Bing Yuan seemed hesitant. That person was extremely strong. They could only try to convince Bing Yuan to attack, but Bing Yuan did not dare attack either. Lin Feng's power is unfathomable. He has broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer already, and that was over half a year ago. He's probably much stronger now, thought Bing Yuan while staring at Lin Feng. He then thought, besides, I came to Celestial River for a reason and it has nothing to do with Lin Feng. The most important thing is for me to buy the thing I need. When Bing Yuan thought about the situation, he suddenly felt relieved. He had to stay in his peak condition because he had even more important things to do. In comparison with he had to do, the death of his comrade was meaningless. "Let's go," said Bing Yuan as he started leaving. That move made everyone stupefied. "Let's go?" Bing Yuan surprisingly left. Was he scared to fight against Lin Feng? The disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain village were even more surprised. Bing Yuan wasn't fighting? Their deceased fellow disciple wasn't going to be avenged? "Let's go," said Bing Yuan extremely coldly, which made them shiver. Immediately after, they glared at Lin Feng again yet left. They didn't dare contradict Bing Yuan. In the mountain village, Bing Yuan was extremely powerful and aggressive. Those who dared oppose him were punished. That time they didn't know why he wasn't avenging his fellow disciple. Was he afraid of Lin Feng? Lin Feng looked at them leave. He looked calm and serene. Immediately after, he continued walking around the dream pavilion. A moment later, he arrived in front of an old man's rug that was selling pill ingredients and squatted down. "Old man, how much is that spiritual lichen?" asked Lin Feng to the old man. The old man raised his head, looked at Lin Feng and said, "1 purity stone of lower quality per stem. Help yourself." "I would like 100,000 stems," said Lin Feng. The old man was astonished and was blankly staring at Lin Feng. 100,000 stems. Even though spiritual lichen wasn't extremely valuable, 100,000 was a huge number. "Why do you need so much lichen?" "To concoct some spiritual sanguine pills." "Spiritual sanguine pills? What other ingredients do you need?" Lin Feng's pupils shrank. He knew that he had found the right person. "I am making pure earth pills, spirit breath pills and red sun pills." When the old man heard Lin Feng, he remained silent for a second. Lights were flashing in his eyes. He then said, "Wonderful. Then you need some scorching heat herbs, sanguine plants and pure qi grains." "Indeed. I need a lot of ingredients," said Lin Feng while nodding. While walking around, Lin Feng was observing the vendors and their strength. That old man's strength was unfathomable. Ba Dao hadn't been able to tell. Therefore they had come to him. It seemed like he was an extremely powerful cultivator who, on top of that, could also concoct pills. The old man smiled and looked at Lin Feng. "It seems like you came prepared. But did you already know that I had these things?" The old man smiled and looked at Lin Feng. "It seems like you came prepared. But did you already know that I had these things?" "Old man, I didn't know. But a cultivator of the Xianqi layer selling pill ingredients here is always something easily noticeable," said Lin Feng with a warm smile. The old man smiled and shook his head. "Don't call me old man, you can call me Mr. Hua. That girl behind you is just as enigmatic." "Mr. Hua," said Lin Feng, getting more intimate with the old man. He then continued, "Mr. Hua, I just told you what I needed and I need huge quantities. Do you know where I can find such large quantities? If small quantities are enough for you, I can help you, but if you need hundreds of thousands, I have no solution for you." The old man was shaking his head. Hundreds of thousands, that was a huge quantity. Who was able to pick that many plants? "But you asked me where you could find them. There is a place, but you cannot go there." "Cannot go there?" Lin Feng was stupefied and asked, "If I ask you to help me, will it still be difficult?" The old man frowned and looked at Lin Feng. "Hundreds of thousands is a colossal quantity. I'm not sure I can get that much. Besides, if you need hundreds of thousands of each of the herbs and plant, Even though they are not valuable, it is still a tremendous amount. Do you know of spirit blood pills? Asked Lin Feng. Huh. The old man was stupefied. A strong qi emerged from his body. That abrupt rise of qi made Lin Feng feel an incredible heat, as if he was going to burn alive. The old man probably was an expert at using fire. People who were experts at using fire had high proficiency in concocting pills and fabricating weapons. Of course, the soul also had to be extremely strong. What do you know about spirit blood pills? Asked the old man. I know about them. Spirit blood pills can alter the blood vessels and the soul, making a cultivator's blood vessels and soul become extremely strong. They are extremely beneficial for cultivators of the Xian Qi layer. It's a Xian level pill of medium quality, said Lin Feng slowly. The classification of pills was similar to that of weapons, which also depended on the different cultivation levels. After ordinary weapons, there were spiritual weapons and then mystical weapons. Besides, there were ordinary pills which were suitable for cultivators of Qi layer but who were of almost no use for cultivators of the Ling Qi layer. Only Ling level pills had effect on cultivators of the Ling Qi layer, but were of almost no use to cultivators of the Xian Qi layer. Cultivators of the Xian Qi layer required spiritual weapons as well as Xian level pills. The spirit blood pill was a Xian level pill of average quality, which was extremely beneficial to cultivators of the Xian Qi layer, even if they had broken through to the 6th Xian Qi layer. Weapons and pills were also classified according to their quality: high, average and low quality. Using Xian level pills of average quality on a cultivator who was under the 4th Xian Qi layer would have been a waste. Even though the pills were still beneficial to them, their bodies weren't able to entirely assimilate them. Then, if used on a cultivator above the 6th Ling Qi layer, these pills had almost no effect. Therefore, they were adequate for cultivators between the 4th and the 6th Qi layer. How could the old man not be surprised when he heard that Lin Feng wanted some Xian level pills of average quality? Can you concoct them? Asked Mr. Hua while staring at Lin Feng. At that moment, Mr. Hua didn't look sluggish anymore, he looked captivated. How could I concoct that kind of high-quality pills? Said Lin Feng while shaking, which made the old man frown. But Lin Feng continued. But accidentally, I obtained the recipe of the spirit blood pills. The recipe? The old man was surprised and started breathing faster. There were 3 difficult things about pills: being able to or finding someone to concoct the pills, finding the material to concoct the pills, and then obtaining the recipe. Besides, the recipe was the most important thing. Without it, it was impossible to concoct the pills. Of course, many people thought that the one who concocted the pills was the most important because it was very difficult to find good ones. But without the recipe, how could anyone concoct the pills? However, with the recipe, even without someone to concoct the pill, at least the recipe was already extremely valuable. Indeed. The recipe, Mr. Hua. I just talked about a few pills. I need to make at least 20,000 of each. What materials do I need? Master Hua probably knows better than me. If you can help me, I will offer you the recipe of the spirit blood pill. Lin Feng had said 20,000, which represented a huge quantity. It was the first time that Mr. Hua heard a person say that they needed 20,000 pills. Then don't worry, I understand, said Mr. Hua while staring at Lin Feng. Mr. Hua, if you kill me, you will not obtain the recipe. Besides, you might not necessarily be able to kill me. I am convinced that Mr. Hua wouldn't try such a thing anyway, said Lin Feng while smiling. Mr. Hua remained silent, looking pensive. Alright, deal, but I need a few days. Alright, no problem. 3 days later at dinner time, I will be at the Celestial Mountain restaurant waiting for you. How does that sound? Alright, see you in 3 days, said Mr. Hua while rolling up his sleeves. In a flash, the herbs on the ground vanished. He obviously had a Na stone. Mr. Hua turned around and immediately left the dream pavilion. It seemed like the old man could handle things for Lin Feng at the speed of light. When Lin Feng saw Mr. Hua leave, he smiled. Lin Feng's plan had worked without any incident. Concerning the recipe of the pill, it wasn't going to be a loss for Lin Feng. It was in the memories which the cultivator of the Zun Qi layer had given to him. He just had to write it down on a piece of paper and hand it over. Lin Feng wasn't going to lose anything in the transaction. Let's go. Lin Feng started walking again, going towards the depths of the dream pavilion. They weren't the only people in that case at that moment. They were surrounded by a myriad of people who were walking in the same direction, including the vendors who were packing up their things. The auction sales will start in about half an hour. Do you know if the moonbreaking blade will be sold today or not? Lin Feng respectfully asked someone walking over to their group. That person had seen Lin Feng kill the disciple of the Ice and Snow Mountain village, and then ignore Bing Yuan. They had also heard Lin Feng talk about Xian-level pills with Mr. Hua. That timid person couldn't believe his ears. Besides Lin Feng, who was also extremely strong, the man wearing a bronze mask who was following him was probably just a subordinate. Leave. Forget everything that you have seen and heard today, said Lin Feng, sounding cold and detached. That person then timidly nodded and said, understood. After that, that person left feeling aggrieved. Lin Feng ignored him and moved towards the entrance of the auction. Then Lin Feng said to the two people at the entrance, I have things to sell at auction, with whom should I talk? Come with me, said one person. Lin Feng followed him and entered the auction room. After a short time, they arrived in a room where people were sorting various goods. When Lin Feng saw all these goods, he was stupefied. There was an incredible quantity of goods that people wanted to sell at auction. The person who received Lin Feng was a very sexy woman. Her skin was as white as snow. Her shoulders were beautiful and well-formed. She had well-developed white breasts. She was extremely attractive. What do you want to sell, sir? A D-level skill of low quality called Swift Leaf, as well as 10 spiritual weapons of medium quality, said Lin Feng, sounding cold and detached. The sexy woman was stupefied. The smile on her face suddenly turned into a deep and profound facial expression. Sir, please come with me, said the woman while standing up. You can wait here for a moment, said Lin Feng to Meng Qing and Ba Dao. Immediately after, he entered in a secret room with the woman. In that room, things were in complete disorder. It definitely required some tidying. These goods were the ones which had been selected to be sold at auction. Sir, show me the things which you would like to sell at auction, said the woman who had arrived by an old man's side. All right. The Swift Leaf book appeared in Lin Feng's hand. At the same time, above the ground, a small light flashed and suddenly 10 spiritual weapons appeared, and a resplendent light emerged. Lin Feng handed over the Swift Leaf skill to his interlocutor. The woman gave to the old man, who looked through it. Immediately after, the old man nodded and said, no problem. It's a medium quality skill of the D level. There is no problem with the spiritual weapons either. Thank you, senior. The woman smiled and packed the skill and the weapons. She then sealed the box for safekeeping. She then wrote a few notes on the package and handed a small jade card over to Lin Feng. Sir, your things will be sold tomorrow after the auction. You only need to come back with jade card and we will know what items belong to you. The fortune won't be small and you will receive all your purity stones without a fee. Besides, using that card, you can enter the area reserved to our special clients, said that beautiful woman with an enchanting smile on her face. While talking, the way she was moving her body made her look even more seducing. No fees and sold tomorrow, thought Lin Feng. The normal procedure was supposed to last 3 days, but because Lin Feng's goods were extremely valuable, he had gained some privileges. Concerning the reward, Lin Feng thought that he had already had plenty of fortune. The memories of the strong cultivator were his most valuable possession. Lin Feng nodded and left the room. In the area reserved for special clients, Lin Feng and Meng Qing were sitting on soft chairs while Ba Dao was standing behind them. In the area reserved for special clients, Lin Feng and Meng Qing were sitting on soft chairs while Ba Dao was standing behind them. From the inside of their booth and behind the special curtains, they could clearly see the entire huge auction room. At that moment, a delicate silhouette suddenly appeared at the very front. That was precisely the woman that had received Lin Feng before. At that moment, she had already changed her clothes and was wearing a long blue cheongsam which was drifting over the floor. Her shoulders weren't covered and her dress also had a low-cut neckline. Lin Feng was feeling a strange sensation. A light flashed in Meng Qing's eyes, who then glared at Lin Feng. As if Lin Feng had sensed it, he turned his head and briefly looked at Meng Qing. Lin Feng couldn't help but smile while his lips were slightly shaking. At that moment, in the area reserved to special guests, there was an ordinary young man who looked ice-cold like a blade. Then a group of people, looking solemn and respectful, were standing behind him. Lan Jiao is more and more alluring each day, said Leng Yu indifferently. Leng Yu, if you like Lan Jiao, she will not refuse, flattered someone standing behind him. Leng Yu, looking evil, said. Well, if she's too obedient, what's the point? I like to cut them by force. When the four others heard him, they looked at each other. The Blade Master was a monstrously aggressive and sly person. He didn't care about knowing if the person was willing or not. He enjoyed using his blade to abuse women. The four others would never have thought that he had a tendency like that. He surprisingly liked to cut them. It's not that easy to come to Celestial River. I want the blade, but I also want a few women, said Leng Yu, sounding indifferent. The four others were surprised. It seemed like Lan Jiao wouldn't be able to escape from him. Why did she have to have such an alluring body, and on top of that, why was she revealing so much of it? It certainly made men drool. On that day the auction was normal. There were 10 items. Lin Feng wasn't interested in the things which were being displayed at that moment. He was just sitting there and watching. However, at the moment when Lan Jiao displayed the 8th item, Lin Feng started to be interested. It was a Ling-level spiritual weapon of higher quality. Its price was 1,000 purity stones of medium quality. On that day, many people had come for the moonbreaking blade. It had just been introduced that its price had already been raised to 2,000, which exceeded many people's budgets already. Spiritual weapons of higher quality were precious, but 2,000 purity stones was very expensive. 3,000 purity stones of medium quality. At that moment, a voice which was as sharp as a blade emerged in the atmosphere. Some blade energy also spread in the atmosphere and enveloped the crowd in the auction room for a few seconds. Many people were surprised. They turned around and looked at the reserved area. A single person was releasing all that blade energy. It's the Blade Master, thought the crowd. That blade energy had probably been released by the Blade Master. People knew that he had come to Celestial River. Surprisingly, he was releasing his blade energy across the crowd. How aggressive. But the Blade Master was stronger and more gifted than them. Besides, he was a disciple of the Hao Yu sect. He could afford to be that aggressive. He was a bit more vigilant in front of a cultivator of the Xianqi layer, but facing people of lower levels didn't scare him at all. After he released Blade Qi, obviously the entire atmosphere became silent. 3,001 purity stones of medium quality. At that moment, someone sounding cold and detached spoke, breaking the silence. That voice also came from the area for special guests. Besides, that person wasn't far from the Blade Master. Only one booth was separated them. Huh. Leng Yu was surprised and immediately said coldly, 4,000. 4,001, said the other voice, sounding cold. Progressively, Leng Yu's facial expression was changing. He suddenly released much more blade energy towards that person. Blade Master, what does this mean? The auction room is supposed to be a fair and quiet place. What are you doing? Said a cold voice, sounding ice cold and aggressive while blocking the blade energy. Disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. The crowd was surprised. These were people of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, and surprisingly someone dared provoke the Blade Master. Only one person could do that. Bing Yuan, shouted the Blade Master and continued. 5,000. 5,001. 8,000. That time, Leng Yu immediately increased to 8,000 at the same time. He released an incredible quantity of blade force which made the ground shake. The crowd was stupefied. The Blade Master was wealthy. That price was already very high. Since brother Leng Yu likes it that much, I give up. Leng Yu smiled indifferently. Ice-cold energy invaded the atmosphere like a hurricane. White frost emerged as well, and explosion sounds. The booth separating these two people exploded and 3 silhouettes were revealed. A man and a woman were sitting there, and a man with a bronze mask was standing behind them. Well, thank you, Bing Yuan, for leaving the moonbreaking blade for me, said the Blade Master, sound egocentric. He didn't even pay attention to Lin Feng and the 2 others in the middle. The crowd was looking at Lin Feng, the 2 others. They were secretly shaking their heads. Lin Feng and the 2 others had unluckily ended up in a booth between Bing Yuan and the Blade Master. They were going to receive the collateral damage. Lan Jiao, say it, said the Blade Master while looking at the stage. Lan Jiao looked at the booth which had just exploded and smiled while slightly nodding. She was about to say something when Lin Feng said, 8,001. Everybody was surprised when they heard Lin Feng. He was surprisingly bidding. He's been angered? Maybe he lost his sanity because of the explosion. It seems like they've run out of luck. Many people came up with the same idea, but those who had seen Lin Feng and Bing Yuan didn't think that was the case. Not only had Lin Feng provoked Bing Yuan, but he was also provoking the Blade Master, Leng Yu. When Leng Yu heard Lin Feng, he was stupefied. Apart from Bing Yuan, there was someone else who was trying to anger him. The Blade Master slightly closed his eyes and concentrated to find out who had said that. He then immediately found out. Then, he opened his eyes again and a cold smile appeared on his face. "It seems like the warning I gave you with my blade in the restaurant wasn't enough," said Leng Yu coldly. Immediately after, he said, 9,000 purity stones of medium quality. 9,001, said Lin Feng hastily almost at the same time as Leng Yu finished speaking. The scariest was that Lin Feng sounded calm. He didn't sound nervous at all, as if he didn't care about the Blade Master getting angry. "You want to die," said Leng Yu while standing up. An incredible blade energy rolled in the air emitting explosive sounds. At that moment, Leng Yu launched himself through the curtains in front of him and appeared in front of the crowd. At that moment, he and Lin Feng were only separated by a small partition. They just had to make a small step forwards and they would be able to see each other. Ba Dao's silhouette flickered and moved to the front. His agility was insane. In a flash, an incredible amount of bait force invaded the atmosphere. In the air, an explosion sound emerged when the two blade forces collided. "He stopped bidding and is making a spectacle of himself. The Blade Master should be renamed the Shameless Master," joked Lin Feng. How could he be so daring as to make fun of Leng Yu in front of everybody? 12,000 purity stones of medium quality, said Leng Yu while gnashing his teeth. He had bid again because Lin Feng had joked about the fact that he had stopped bidding. As expected, people of the Hao Yu sect have so many purity stones, said Lin Feng while laughing and then continued. That spiritual weapon is now too expensive for me. He should die. He did that on purpose. That guy is interesting. He surprisingly dares to provoke the Blade Master, tricking him into spending more purity stones for the moonbreaking blade. When the crowd heard Lin Feng, they were stupefied. That was extremely audacious. Leng Yu and the four people behind him looked ice cold. Haha. Brother, you're right, it seems like the Hao Yu sect has too many purity stones, said Bing Yuan in the tone of a joke. He sounded overjoyed to pour oil onto the flames. Besides, Leng Yu would hate Lin Feng even more if they fought. That would be interesting. But Lin Feng smiled coldly, his lips vibrated and he replied extremely coldly. Who are you calling your brother? The people of the Hao Yu sect are just like you. You are all shameless and have to do things in the shadows, because you don't dare let your real intentions show. You are all shameless cowards. When Lin Feng finished talking, the crowd was once again astonished. Not only was Lin Feng provoking the Blade Master, but he was provoking Bing Yuan. He was fearlessly humiliating them. Bing Yuan's smile became stiff, and then an exploding sound emerged in the atmosphere. The three rooms were united. Its occupants could all clearly see each other. Bing Yuan's smile became stiff, and then an exploding sound emerged in the atmosphere. The three rooms were united. Its occupants could all clearly see each other. At that moment, the main representative of the Ice and Snow Mountain village was Bing Yuan, and for the Hao Yu sect it was Leng Yu the Blade Master. Besides them, there were three more people. One of them was standing before the booth, the two others were a man and a woman. They were both calmly sitting on their chairs, ignoring the others. They had not moved a single finger so far and were just talking. Besides, that girl was wearing a fine veil on her face, looking fascinatingly beautiful. Bing Yuan, are you laughing at me? Leng Yu said in the tone of a joke. Bing Yuan had been provoking him all the way. He wanted Lin Feng and him to fight, but the result was that Lin Feng humiliated them both. Bing Yuan was glumly smiling. He had already given Lin Feng face, but Lin Feng the first time killed his fellow disciple and humiliated him. The second time, he was humiliating him again. Brother, Leng Yu, how should we dispose of him? You decide. Bing Yuan said, sounding evil, getting ready to attack Lin Feng. Who's your brother? He's right. People of the Ice and Snow Mountain village are all cowards. What makes you think that we can become brothers? Said Leng Yu. Bing Yuan was dumbstruck. He had the impression that the whole crowd was staring at him, and that he was suffocating from the humiliation. The oxygen seemed unable to reach his lungs anymore, and he felt like he couldn't breathe. A great quantity of cold energy spread through the air. The entire auction room seemed like it was going to freeze. Gentlemen, now please let the auction continue. You can solve your problems after the auction, said Lan Jiao from the stage. Her smile was soft and warm, just like the sound of her voice, which suddenly made the atmosphere feel a bit lighter. All right, said Bing Yuan, looking ice cold. Lin Feng nodded at Lan Jiao and smiled back to her out of politeness. Now Ling Yu has bid 12,000 purity stones of medium quality. Is anyone willing to raise? Said Lan Jiao while smiling at the crowd. Nobody was answering. 12,000 for a spiritual weapon of that quality was already too expensive. In order to practice cultivation, even for a cultivator of the Xianqi layer, so many purity stones of medium quality would have been enough to practice indefinitely. If there is nobody, I would like to congratulate the Blade Master on his new acquisition, the Moonbreaking Blade. Lan Jiao smiled and continued. The next object of our auction sales is an ancient cauldron. On the cauldron 9 dragons are carved. This cauldron is hundreds of thousands of years old. It must have been used to concoct pills and weapons in ancient times, but it seems that some parts are now missing. We cannot find out its level, but the expert of our company, the Dream Pavilion, said that if no part was missing, it would be at least a Xian-level cauldron of high quality, a real treasure. For everybody to understand clearly what parts are missing, we will show you the cauldron. When Lan Jiao finished talking, 2 people brought a cauldron. That cauldron was about 1 meter high. Its diameter was also about 1 meter. On the top there were 9 dragon carvings. They almost looked alive. Besides, there was one dragon which was looking up at the sky and uttering a long cry. It seemed like it was about to fly away. However, the 8 other dragons seemed to be incomplete and did not look like the first dragon, as if that was the part that Lan Jiao had mentioned. Besides, from a certain distance, that cauldron seemed to be absolutely normal, and its carvings seemed to be releasing a strange qi. I hope that you can trust our experts at the Dream Pavilion. This cauldron has some missing parts. Yet it shouldn't be inferior to a Ling-level cauldron of higher quality. You can already use it to concoct pills. If it were intact, it would definitely be a treasure of the Xian level. Even when mentioning these characteristics, it wouldn't be enough for the crowd to be interested. In Celestial River, we always have some antiquities which have missing parts. We are honest about it. However, it would still be classed as Ling level of higher quality. Besides, it can also be used to defend from attacks. Perhaps there were some cultivators who could concoct pills who would be interested. The price is 1,000 purity stones of medium quality, said Lan Jiao. Immediately after, people in the crowd shook their heads. 1,000 for a broken cauldron was too expensive and unworthy. When Lan Jiao saw that the crowd was shaking their heads, she smiled wryly. She knew that selling that precious cauldron wouldn't be easy. It was difficult to get a good price for it, but it was really a priceless treasure. I will buy it for 1,000 purity stones of medium quality, said someone at that moment. That person was an old man. He could obviously concoct pills. Even though that cauldron was of no use, the old man was still interested in these kinds of mysterious treasures. Besides, as far as he was concerned, 1,000 purity stones of medium quality wasn't a big sum. Since the old man said so, just give it to him, somebody said in a low voice, but people really despised that cauldron. People didn't fight for it because it wasn't an attractive object. Everybody remained silent. The atmosphere was a bit cold. That cauldron seems pretty nice. I think it's worth getting. It's a real antique. I will give 2,000 for it, said Lin Feng, sounding cold and detached. At that moment it was the first object which he found interesting. On that cauldron, 9 dragons were surprisingly engraved. It had been in Celestial River for hundreds of thousands of years but had been lost. In the memories Lin Feng received from the cultivator of the Zunqi layer, there was a story about 10 cauldrons in the continent of the 9 clouds. Within these 10 cauldrons, the cauldron with the 9 dragon heads was ranked 9th. It had been missing for hundreds of thousands of years and Lin Feng could recognize it thanks to its patterns. However, nobody seemed to know about it. That object was extremely valuable but nobody knew about it. Lin Feng had almost immediately bid 10,000 for it, but he didn't dare raise it so much because people would have found it suspicious. That old man looked at Lin Feng and Lin Feng slightly nodded and smiled, looking calm and serene. He tried not to look surprised. Since the young man likes it, I will give it to him for 2,000 purity stones of medium quality, which is already a high price, the old man said, which made the entire crowd nod slowly. Nobody wanted to keep bidding. Moron, joked Bing Yuan, but Lin Feng decided to ignore him. It was a cauldron with 9 dragon heads engraved, and Lin Feng was getting it for 2,000 purity stones of medium quality. Lin Feng didn't care about being called a moron 100 times over. "Nobody is bidding anymore?" asked Lan Jiao to the crowd. As expected, nobody spoke. Lan Jiao didn't continue anymore either. After all, she already thought that 2,000 purity stones of medium quality was a lot for that cauldron. It wasn't worth it. "Congratulations to the young man for winning the cauldron," said Lan Jiao to Lin Feng while slightly bowing. Her soft and white breasts looked even bigger as she bowed down, which drew everybody's attention. After taking the cauldron with the 9 dragon heads away, an enchanting smile appeared on Lan Jiao's face, and she said, "The last thing is the essence fire of a Xian-level beast, the 7-tailed fox. I am convinced that I don't need to say much about the price." Essence fire. Lin Feng was stupefied. That was from a beast of the Xian level. A cultivator of the Xian Qi layer could use pure Qi, and if they had a fire-based spirit, absorbing that essence fire, their attacks would be enhanced. Ferocious beasts were similar to cultivators in the fact that they condensed pure Qi. The 7-tailed fox was a fire beast. Its essence fire was extremely strong. It could absorb pure Qi and condense it into essence fire. It could increase its power that way. When Lan Jiao put it down, the crowd went insane. The essence fire of a 7-tailed fox was a treasure. In terms of ferocious beasts, it was an extremely powerful one. For fire cultivators as well as cultivators who concocted pills, that beast was very tempting. "The starting price is 2,000 purity stones of medium quality," said Lan Jiao. It was more expensive than the moonbreaking blade or the ancient cauldron. It was starting at 2,000. Besides, everybody was bidding. Nobody thought that the price was too high. 3,000. 4,000. 10,000. Everybody kept bidding. The price had reached 10,000 in a very short time, and the scariest part was that it didn't stop increasing. 20,000, said an ice-cold voice. At that moment, everybody was stupefied. 20,000. Someone had increased the bid from 10,000 straight to 20,000, and that person was Bing Yuan. 20,000 purity stones of medium quality. How wealthy! Besides, Ling Yu is very wealthy too, thought Lin Feng when he heard them. The Ice and Snow Mountain Village and the Hao Yu sect were much wealthier than the Yun Hai sect used to be. 20,000 purity stones of medium quality. How wealthy! Besides, Ling Yu is very wealthy too, thought Lin Feng when he heard them. The Ice and Snow Mountain Village and the Hao Yu sect were much wealthier than the Yun Hai sect used to be. Besides, Bing Yuan had raised the bid from 10,000 immediately up to 20,000. He obviously was very interested in the fire essence from that beast. The auction room was silent for a moment, and then Lung Yu said, while smiling coldly, 21,000. Huh! The crowd was stupefied. A moment ago, Bing Yuan had forced the price up, so Lung Yu at that moment was wanted to get his revenge. Lung Yu, you already purchased the moonbreaking blade. You still have 21,000 purity stones, said Bing Yuan coldly while frowning. Lung Yu had already spent 12,000 for the blade. Try and continue, you'll see if I have the purity stones, said Lung Yu while laughing indifferently. Bing Yuan didn't dare gamble. Idiot, joked Lin Feng, who was sitting at the same place as before. Bing Yuan had immediately raised to 20,000. Everybody knew that he was extremely interested, which is why Lung Yu was playing with him like that. Bing Yuan is really an idiot. Many people had the same thought as Lin Feng, since he really wanted to have that object and had, a moment before, provoked Lung Yu. Lung Yu getting his revenge was a logical course of events. 22,000, said Bing Yuan coldly. 23,000, replied Lung Yu sounding carefree. 25,000, said Bing Yuan looking glum. The price is still too low. At that moment, Lin Feng suddenly said, 26,000 purity stones of medium quality. 30,000, said Bing Yuan. A wave of coldness coming from the reserved area rolled in the atmosphere, making many people shake from head to toe. Bing Yuan was furious. For 30,000 you can have it, said Lung Yu while smiling indifferently. He finally stopped there. Besides, Bing Yuan seemed to be furious. He didn't look happy. 30,000 purity stones of medium quality was everything that he had. If Lin Feng had raised again, Bing Yuan would have been unable to continue. I also wanted it, said Lin Feng while smiling lightly. Lin Feng knew that he had to stop raising because if Bing Yuan hadn't been able to raise any more, it wouldn't have been amusing at all for Lin Feng. Finally, Bing Yuan had obtained the seven-tailed fox's essence fire for 30,000 purity stones of medium quality. Alright, this is the end of the auction. Everybody can come pick up their treasures, said Lan Jiao while smiling. Immediately after, she left the stage. People who had won bids stood up one after the other and walked towards the area behind the stage. Lin Feng stood up as well and looked outside of the broken window of his booth. An extremely cold qi rose in the atmosphere. Bing Yuan was running past Lin Feng. When they passed, a terrifyingly cold energy moved towards Lin Feng. It was extremely cold. But he didn't stop there, he immediately moved towards the back of the auction. Even though he had spent 30,000 purity stones of medium quality, he was able to get the essence fire. He would be able to fuse it with his ice. At the Ice and Snow Mountain village, they had secret techniques to leave the Ling Qi layer and break through to the Xian Qi layer. All of this would therefore be worth it. A sharp and piercing blade qi emitting a cold aura descended from the sky. Lin Feng's booth exploded. He could see everything very distinctly in Lung Yu's booth. Everything between them had been destroyed by Lung Yu. "You're good," said Lung Yu sounding cold and detached. He then jumped and landed farther away. Besides, one of the disciples of the Hao Yu sect laughed coldly while staring at Lin Feng and the two others. "You're dead," said someone in a low voice mockingly. Lin Feng was definitely going to die. But in the auction room they weren't going to attack, they wouldn't be allowed. However, immediately after leaving the pavilion, Lin Feng would definitely die. "Are you looking at me?" joked Lin Feng. The four people were staring at Lin Feng and remained silent without expressing clearly what they meant. Lin Feng jumped in the air and landed on the stage. He immediately moved towards the back. The one who had made the best transaction was Lin Feng. He had obtained the ancient cauldron. Nobody knew what it was and he had gotten it for only 2,000 purity stones. How could he not be excited to collect it? The 10 people were receiving their respective goods. When Lin Feng's turn arrived, Lan Jiao slightly smiled to him and said, "Sir, you don't need to give any purity stones. Tomorrow when you pass by to receive your purity stones, we'll just subtract the sum." "Alright," said Lin Feng while nodding. He looked at the cauldron which was being brought to him. "Sir, the ancient cauldron is yours," said Lan Jiao while smiling. Lin Feng caressed the cauldron and a cold sensation invaded his hands. Lin Feng could distinctly sense the ancient qi of the object. His body flickered and the cauldron disappeared. Lan Jiao looked at Lin Feng while smiling and said, "May Lan Jiao know your name, sir?" "Lin Feng," said Lin Feng while nodding and smiling at Lan Jiao. People took their respective items and left. "Lin Feng," whispered Lan Jiao while looking at Lin Feng and the rest leave. She then whispered again, "Check him out." "Jiao Jiao, there is no need to check him out," said a silhouette in the corner of the room. It was a middle-aged woman. She had beautiful flowing hair. She looked gorgeous, alluring and morally elevated. "Madame Yun knows him?" asked Lan Jiao while looking at the middle-aged woman. "He set a city on fire and exterminated hundreds of thousands of MOU troops, which completely reversed the course of the war. Then he saved the princess. Later, he galloped into the imperial city and saved Lutsong Lan. Then he killed a young noble and became a marquis. Lin Feng's name is already illustrious. How could I not know him?" said the middle-aged woman while smiling. She had a strange feeling though because Lin Feng had been quiet for 6 months and had suddenly appeared in Celestial River. "How powerful," said Lan Jiao startled. Lin Feng and she were about the same age. He was about 17 or 18 years old and had accomplished so many things already. "Jiao Jiao, he is still single, he hasn't married yet," said the middle-aged woman with a smile yet not a smile on her face. Lan Jiao was surprised, smiled and said, "Madame Yun, you're making fun of me again." "Why?" "Jiao Jiao, heroes marry beautiful women. I think that you and him would be a perfect couple. If you managed to make it join us, that would be a wonderful thing," said Madame Yun to Lan Jiao. Lan Jiao, however, was shaking her head and smiling. Her facial expression was strange. Lin Feng left the auction. At that moment, some silhouettes were closely following him but Lin Feng seemed like he hadn't noticed. He was secretly smiling coldly. He wasn't neither rushing nor walking slowly. He left the pavilion and walked in the direction of the restaurant. "Lin Feng brother, why do you need to leave so fast?" You and me still need to talk, said a voice coming from behind. Then, an extremely cold chi moved straight towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng couldn't help but stop. I'm sorry, I fear that I'm going to have to disappoint you. I have no time to waste with you, said Lin Feng, sounding cold and detached. He then continued walking. But at that moment, in front of Lin Feng, there was a person with their arms folded across their chest. That person said in a low voice, "Why do you need to hurry?" In the distance, people who were coming out of the dream pavilion and looking at the scene. As expected, once they had left the dream pavilion, Bing Yuan and Leng Yu were impatiently waiting for him. How could they forgive Lin Feng for his provocations? Brother Ling Yu, let's put our disagreements aside for the time being. How does that sound? Said Bing Yuan to the Blade Master Ling Yu, who nodded and said, all right. But there are 3 of them and we are 2, what should we do? It's easy, we attack him together and see who kills him first. Then we kill the 2 others one-on-one. All right, but I want that girl, agreed Ling Yu. No problem. That girl seems quite good. You can do whatever you wish with her, said Bing Yuan while smiling evilly. Bing Yuan and Leng Yu's words were echoing one another. In the distance, people were shaking their heads. These 2 people regarded Lin Feng as a toy and they were openly talking about how they were going to kill him in his presence. Lin Feng shouldn't have provoked these 2 influential young men. Bing Yuan was the best disciple of the Ice and Snow Mountain village, and Leng Yu was a prodigy of the Hao Yu sect, the Blade Master. These people were not ordinary people at all. Lin Feng had provoked them, he was going to die for that. However, at that moment, the crowd didn't notice that in Lin Feng's eyes, an ice-cold killing intent appeared. His face was filled with murder. These 2 people had surprisingly dared speak about Meng Qing with obscenities. Meng Qing was the apple of Lin Feng's eye. Nobody was allowed to touch or aggress her. Otherwise they would die. Lin Feng's cold energy didn't make Leng Yu hesitate at all. Instead, he was evilly and viciously staring at Meng Qing. His eyes were sharp as a blade. He then said, come on. Lin Feng's cold energy didn't make Leng Yu hesitate at all. Instead, he was evilly and viciously staring at Meng Qing. His eyes were sharp as a blade. He then said, come on. When he finished talking, Leng Yu took small steps towards Lin Feng. Though his steps were small, he was still extremely quick, just like a whirlwind. Some dust rose from the ground immediately after. Some blade energy reached the dust. Each time Leng Yu took a small step, the blade energy in the air became more dense. Besides, in the blink of an eye, he had made a dozen steps and his blade energy had reached its climax. It was extremely sharp. When he released it, it emitted an ear-piercing whistling sound. At the same time, Bing Yuan was attacking as well. Snow and frost were falling from the sky. A layer of ice invaded the entire atmosphere. It was extremely cold, to the extent that everybody was shaking. How powerful! The crowd in the distance was astonished. Leng Yu, the Blade Master, was as sharp as his blade. Bing Yuan of the Ice and Snow Mountain village had already managed to deeply freeze the entire atmosphere. Under his skills, the ground had become ice and snow. These 2 people were extremely strong. They definitely were some of the most outstanding junior cultivators of their generation. They were real geniuses. When that blade descends, he will definitely cut into 2 pieces, said the disciples of the Hao Yu sect arrogantly. Leng Yu, when battling, rarely had to strike more than once. Lin Feng wouldn't even withstand a single attack. He would immediately be killed. Lin Feng, you will freeze to death. Your blood vessels will freeze until you die, said the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain village. Lin Feng was too arrogant. He had dared kill one of the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain village. Besides, he had also dared to provoke Bing Yuan. He wanted to die. They couldn't wait to see how Lin Feng intended to dodge Bing Yuan's attacks. Many people were convinced that Lin Feng was going to die. He was an obscure and unknown person. How could he rival with the Blade Master and Bing Yuan? The real question was who would be the first to kill Lin Feng. Lin Feng, when he sensed the sharp blade and the ice energy, still looked calm and serene. He looked so calm that his face was completely still. However, his eyes were filled with coldness and murderous intentions. Slash! Shouted Leng Yu while blade energy started descending. Immediately after he said the word slash, a sharp energy moved towards Lin Feng and enveloped him. A bright and resplendent blade light emerged. and like lightning descended from the sky towards Lin Feng. Die. At that moment Bing Yuan also attacked. He had just released an incredible quantity of ice qi which was enveloping Lin Feng's body, as if it was corroding Lin Feng's skin. It seemed like Lin Feng was going to freeze to death. At the same time an ice fist was moving towards Lin Feng as well, bombarding through the atmosphere. It was ice cold and brutal. Die! Shouted Lin Feng very distinctly while slightly raising his head. Die, die! Was echoing in the atmosphere and far away into the distance. An incredible deadly qi invaded the atmosphere as if it could slaughter everyone. That incredibly sharp deadly qi astonished Leng Yu and Bing Yuan. Their hearts started pounding. Their blade and ice attacks seemed very weak in comparison. The force and qi of their attacks was much weaker than what Lin Feng was releasing. Lin Feng threw himself at Bing Yuan like a sword. Then a pallid sword light flashed for a brief moment. Bing Yuan's heart was brutally and violently pounding, and immediately after, it stopped. At the same time, Leng Yu's resplendent blade also fell through the air. Slash! A slight sound emerged in the air. Bing Yuan's body had been cut into 2 pieces and blood was gushing everywhere. Blood was everywhere. Leng Yu's blade had cut Bing Yuan's body into 2 pieces down the middle. The ground had exploded beneath him. The 2 halves of Bing Yuan's body flew in opposite directions from the explosion. The atmosphere suddenly became absolutely silent. The crowd looked terrified. They were staring at Bing Yuan's corpse. He died. Bing Yuan was cut into 2 by Leng Yu's blade? The crowd looked absolutely dumbstruck as if they couldn't believe their eyes, especially the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. Bing Yuan was the best disciple of the mountain village. He had broken through to the 9th qi layer. And he had died like that? One attack had been enough to cut him in 2? Besides, he had been killed by Leng Yu. It couldn't be true, it had to be a dream. An extremely strong junior cultivator had been killed in a flash. You killed Bing Yuan? Said the people of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village while furiously staring at Leng Yu. Idiot, didn't you see that Lin Feng killed him before my attack even hit? Do you really think it was me that killed him? If I had, he wouldn't have died with only 1 strike. Said Leng Yu while furious. At that moment his facial expression was hideous. He was staring at Lin Feng. That guy had needed only 1 strike to kill Bing Yuan and forced him to cut Bing Yuan in half with his attack. If Leng Yu killed the others, he wouldn't need to justify himself, but this time he had killed a genius of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. If there was no explanation, maybe there would be a serious conflict between the 2 big sections. The consequences would be disastrous. Killed by Lin Feng? The people of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village were looking at Lin Feng. You dare attack Bing Yuan by surprise? Said one of them. Immediately after, they all looked disgusted by Lin Feng. Attacked him by surprise? Lin Feng was stupefied. Immediately after, he shook his head and said, You're all retarded as well as blind. A moment before, Bing Yuan had attacked him, and even if Lin Feng had parried, why say that he had attacked him by surprise? Bing Yuan was attacking him and Lin Feng wanted to strike back. They called that a surprise attack. You all want to die, said Lin Feng when he saw them all starting to walk towards him. He released deadly qi. When the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village sensed that dense deadly qi, their hearts started pounding brutally. That deadly qi was extremely brutal, it was swift and fierce. It doesn't look good, said the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. They had an ominous presentiment. At that moment, they saw a purple energy emerge from Lin Feng's body and move towards them. What's this? Thought the people in the crowd, shocked. That purple energy was floating in the air like a snake towards them. All the people of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village were terrified and panic-stricken. However, that long purple thread of energy turned into a dragon. In a flash it enveloped and swallowed their bodies as they tried to approach Lin Feng. Ah! Some horrible shrieks spread in the air. The long purple dragon was holding them so tightly that it was painful. Their bodies felt like they were melting. Its body completely covered them as if they would be forced to drown inside it. A short moment later, the purple river-like silhouette returned to Lin Feng. At that moment, the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village had already disappeared. They had completely melted and nothing was remaining of their bodies. How terrifying! What kind of spirit is that? It's monstrous. The hearts of the people in the crowd were brutally pounding. All the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain village, including Bing Yuan, had died. Bing Yuan had been cut into two, and the others had been swallowed by a monstrous dragon to the extent that nothing was left. Everything that was happening was too shocking. They wanted to kill Lin Feng? Besides, Bing Yuan and the Blade Master Ling Yu had cooperated, but that had only lasted for a very short moment. Bing Yuan had died, and therefore, the other disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain village had intervened. They thought that they were going to kill Lin Feng with numbers, and in the end, he was still standing there in the same place. A long purple dragon had emerged from his body and swallowed them like an evil spirit. The crowd was just realizing that if Lin Feng had dared to provoke both Bing Yuan and Ling Yu, it was because he was indeed extremely powerful. He was much stronger than Bing Yuan. He's a genius, he's much scarier than Bing Yuan, thought the people in the crowd. At that moment, they were looking at Ling Yu. At that moment, Ling Yu was staring at Lin Feng. He looked perplexed. He looked as sharp as before, but he already didn't look as aggressive. That blade hadn't touched Lin Feng, not even slightly, and because of Lin Feng, he had ended up cutting Bing Yuan's body into two pieces. Lin Feng's power was indeed terrifying. Extremely arrogant, yet can't withstand a single attack. Such a worthless person, said Lin Feng in an ice-cold way while looking at Bing Yuan's corpse. Immediately after, he turned around slowly and looked at Ling Yu. Lin Feng was smiling coldly. Are you the same, Blade Master? Do you think that you can bully everyone with only your current strength? There is a vast ocean of cultivators who are stronger than you. The Blade Master looked glum. His facial expression was hideous, but he had no way to contradict Lin Feng. He was just blankly staring at him. Lin Feng was extremely strong. Ling Yu had to be careful. You threatened us with your blade previously because of a simple sentence? What gives you the right to use a blade in front of me? Lin Feng took a step and sword energy whistled through the air. Sword chi and force was falling from the sky in the form of a hurricane rushing towards Ling Yu. It seemed like 10,000 swords were attacking at the same time. It was terrifying. That sword force was even more brutal than Ling Yu's blade force, and sharper as well. The sword was the emperor of all weapons. What a strong sword chi and force. What a cruel man. The hearts of the people in the crowd were pounding. What a strong sword chi and force. What a cruel man. The hearts of the people in the crowd were pounding. Besides, the four disciples of the Hao Yu sect were dumbstruck. In the Celestial Mountain restaurant, they had provoked Lin Feng. Ling Yu had even been extremely aggressive to them. He had immediately threatened them with a blade and attacked the banister next to Lin Feng. Lin Feng had, however, remained silent and incomparably calm. They had thought that he was a timid coward, a weakling, but at that moment the force and chi which Lin Feng had just released proved to them that if Lin Feng didn't attack them before, it wasn't because he was scared, it was just because they were not fit to be his opponents. When Ling Yu sensed the incomparably sharp energy, he frowned. At that moment, Lin Feng had shown to everybody that he was stronger than Ling Yu. Maybe the real Lin Feng had finally shown himself. However, blade cultivators were sharp, aggressive, and had an indomitable will. With their blades they could annihilate everything. Even if his opponent was extremely strong, Ling Yu remained fearless. He wasn't flinching at all. He was able to condense blade chi. He loved blades, understood blades, grasped how they worked. His nickname, the Blade Master, wasn't just a rumor. Even though he was insufferably arrogant and thought he was the best in the world, he was still a genius. A light flashed. It was the light of the moonbreaking blade. Its light was bright, clear, and piercingly cold. It's a Ling-level weapon, the moonbreaking blade. Ling Yu is surprisingly using his new weapon against that guy. How come we've never heard of him before? Thought many people. At that moment, Ling Yu wasn't hesitating, his body like a sharp blade. He became one with his blade. I recognize that I underestimated you, but you are still very far from being as strong as me, said the Blade Master while holding the moonbreaking blade. Ling Yu still thought he was the best and youngest genius in the world, but as before, he remained vigilant in front of Lin Feng. I, Ling Yu, started practicing blade cultivation when I was 5 years old. At the Hao Yu sect there aren't any strong blade skills. I created everything on my own. I understood how to use blade force and how to use energy attacks. I did all of this in the last year. I defeated many of my fellow disciples at the Hao Yu sect. That's how I became who I am today. I taught myself a skill called Lonely Shadow. You can die under my created blade attack. I'm proud of it, said Lung Yu. He was speaking slowly. He considered everything and everyone beneath his attention. When the crowd heard him, they were all secretly nodding. Lung Yu was really a genius. He taught himself blade skills and could use energy attacks. He was extremely strong and powerful. Maybe Lin Feng was weaker than him. You don't understand blades. Your talent is that of a mediocre person, said Lin Feng while smiling coldly, and then continued. You cannot rival me. Just like you, I've taught myself sword skills and I have only been practicing for a year. Come and have a try. 1 year. The crowd was stupefied. Lin Feng had been practicing sword skills for only a year? Was it possible to become that strong within a year? Besides, Lin Feng was saying that Lung Yu didn't understand blades, that he was a mediocre cultivator. If he was a mediocre cultivator, what were the people in the crowd? It hurt the pride of many of these people. Alright, remember, the name of my attack that will take your life is Lonely Shadow, said Lung Yu slowly. Then he jumped and didn't release any blade force. Instead, he used his blade to carry out an energy attack. Lonely Shadow, he said in a low voice. A light appeared and invaded the atmosphere as if it had no limit. That was a blade energy attack. That blade was like a person who didn't know which direction to attack from, so it appeared in every direction. Energy attacks, when using a blade, seemed like there were thousands of blades even though there was only one. That shadow-like attack was unfathomable and enigmatic. It seemed like it chased its opponent. Besides, if it touched anyone, nobody would be able to resist the power. Before, Lung Yu required only one attack to kill opponents of the same level as him. Even if they were people of the 9th Ling Qi layer, he could easily kill them. That Lonely Shadow was astonishing. Nobody had ever survived such an energy attack. And at that moment it would be especially complicated since Lung Yu was carrying it out using a spiritual weapon of higher quality. His precious treasure, the moonbreaking blade. Lin Feng, you will definitely die. That blade attack is unfathomable. The Blade Master really deserves the moonbreaking blade. Bing Yuan was much weaker than him. When the crowd saw that blade, they were astonished. They gradually understood why, when the Blade Master used his blade, people would die. His Lonely Shadow attack fell from the air. The crowd had the impression that Lin Feng was already cut in two in front of them. A tearing sound spread in the air which made the crowd narrow their eyes. What's going on? The hearts of the people in the crowd were pounding. The moonbreaking blade was descending from the air, like a lonely shadow. However, Lin Feng was patiently waiting in his initial position. In front of him there was a sword. It was an ordinary sword, however, a blade was pressed against it. The blade was unable to move further. That majestic moonbreaking blade had been stopped by an ordinary sword. How's that possible? The crowd was fixedly staring at the ordinary sword. It couldn't look more ordinary than it did, but it had blocked the powerful blade. Nobody knew how Lin Feng had done that. I told you, you don't understand blades, calmly said Lin Feng. He was looking at Lung Yu, who looked astonished. He couldn't believe it. Then the sword slowly moved back. It started emitting a bright and resplendent light. It was dazzling to the eyes. What a brilliant sword! Energy attack. Lung Yu's heart was pounding. He used his blade to carry out an energy attack again, to block the sword in front of him, and at that moment a metallic sound spread in the atmosphere. The moonbreaking blade was blown away and immediately blood was projected into the air. Lung Yu's body was violently pushed backwards. If he hadn't used his blade energy attack, that dazzling sword would have killed him. Lin Feng suddenly raised his hand and caught the flying moonbreaking blade. He then immediately shouted, Ba Dao. Ba Dao was stupefied. Lin Feng threw the moonbreaking blade to him. His eyes were excited behind his mask. Lin Feng had, as expected, remembered his promise. He had taken the moonbreaking blade and given it to Ba Dao. Even though it was stolen, it didn't matter. Lin Feng had anticipated that Lung Yu would attack him. He knew that even if he didn't get the moonbreaking blade at the auction, sooner or later, the blade would be Ba Dao's blade. Lung Yu lowered his head. There was a long blood trail from his arm which was almost cut off. He was stupefied. He hadn't even had one occasion to strike Lin Feng with his blade. Lin Feng had remained calm and relaxed and had easily blocked all of his attacks. Lin Feng was right. Lung Yu didn't understand blades. He definitely had natural talent, but it was still comparable to that of mediocre people. I taught myself how to use my blade when I was 5, and he has only been using a sword for a year, and he's already able to defeat me. Why the hell was I so proud? Where did my arrogance come from? Leng Yu asked himself. He regretted having the reputation of a genius at that moment. I was so proud of my lonely shadow, but he blocked it so easily. Maybe I really don't understand blades. Leng Yu's heart was filled with sadness. He felt completely dispirited. Lin Feng destroyed his arrogance. When Lin Feng noticed that Leng Yu was regretting, Lin Feng smiled coldly. Those who dared to humiliate Meng Qing had to die. Die! Lin Feng took a step. An infinite quantity of sword qi invaded the atmosphere. People's hearts were pounding. Leng Yu was going to get killed by Lin Feng? Was another genius going to take his last breath? Lin Feng's sword was dazzling. At that moment, Leng Yu was absolutely hopeless and dispirited. It seemed like he had given up. He didn't have his fighting spirit anymore. He was just looking at Lin Feng's sword piercing the atmosphere. There was a mountain of thoughts in his head. He didn't understand what was happening. He had been training hard for 10 years. Get lost. At that moment, a shadow appeared in the distance behind Leng Yu. It looked like a swift and fierce blade shadow. It immediately moved towards Lin Feng. That person was like a blade and their energy was boundless. Slash! Lin Feng's sword descended from the air. An explosion filled the air. A crevice appeared in the ground. Lin Feng groaned. That extremely swift and fierce blade had reached him, which violently knocked him backwards. The blade is a weapon for strong cultivators. Losing and winning is something that depends on fate. In any case, there is always a cultivator who is stronger than you in this world, said an extremely loud and mighty voice which filled the sky. Then it continued. Leng Yu, no need to be discouraged. I won't kill him, so you can kill him as you wish with your blade. After that, 2 silhouettes started to rush into the sky. People's hearts were trembling. There was a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer amongst them. He had stopped Lin Feng to help Leng Yu. He said that he wasn't killing Lin Feng to let Leng Yu do that himself. He was sparing Lin Feng on purpose. Lin Feng, you're very lucky, thought the people in the crowd. But at that moment the ground started shaking insanely. A white silhouette, which looked like a celestial being, was attacking. In a flash, her silhouette moved towards a distant point. She released an incredible coldness which was freezing people's hearts and thoughts. The only thing left in the area seemed to be coldness. Die! Shouted the ice-cold voice. In the atmosphere, some ice transformed into a white arrow which rushed towards the figure in the distance. The silhouette in the horizon flickered. Their pace accelerated. That blade shadow looked like a shooting star. However, that white arrow was still moving straight towards the silhouette at a much faster speed. Then that silhouette groaned and blood splashed through the air. Such a move had made the words that they just spoke sound like a joke. If Lin Feng wanted to kill, he could kill as he pleased. It's a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer. It's a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer. When the crowd saw that white silhouette, who had suddenly appeared, they were stupefied. She attacked and the ice from her attack was shot across hundreds of kilometers. Her speed was also much more incredible than that of the blade shadow. After her attack, blood filled the air. That silent woman, who was always by Lin Feng's side, was actually a strong cultivator. Besides, Bing Yuan and Leng Yu had dared to humiliate her. They wanted to die. If Leng Yu managed to leave alive, that would be a strike of luck. No matter if it was Lin Feng or Meng Qing, they could both easily kill Leng Yu. Who's that person who came to save Leng Yu? He's also a blade user, how surprising, thought the crowd looking at them from a distance. They didn't know if he was also a strong cultivator of the Hao Yu sect. Why wasn't he showing himself? Why was he hiding his identity? Why was he afraid of showing his true colors? Besides, he had come to save Leng Yu and hadn't even stopped for 1 second. Lin Feng gazed into the distance. He was thinking. That person was a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer and was, just like Leng Yu, a blade cultivator. His blade abilities were extremely advanced. Was he Leng Yu's teacher? Genius of the Hao Yu sect, it would be best for you to not cross my path again, thought Lin Feng coldly. He then immediately moved towards Bing Yuan's corpse and looked for a ring with a Na stone. That guy had obtained the essence fire of the seven-tail fox. It couldn't have gone far. He probably had a Na stone to store his items. Besides, the purity stones he had couldn't have come from nowhere. Since Lin Feng had killed him, he had to take his Na stone, otherwise wouldn't it just be wasted? Lin Feng took the ring from Bing Yuan's finger. Blood dripped on the ring. In a flash, information entered Lin Feng's consciousness. A cold qi dispersed into the air. That was Bing Yuan's remaining qi inside the ring. The essence fire of the seven-tail fox was inside. Besides, there were a few skills and a few purity stones. Lin Feng wasn't interested in these little things, he just wanted the Xian-level essence fire. It was extremely valuable. Bing Yuan had spent an enormous amount of money to buy it, but now it belonged to Lin Feng. Besides, coupled with his ancient cauldron and the moonbreaking blade which he had stolen from Lung Yu, Lin Feng had managed to take the top 3 items of the auction. Celestial River is abundant in treasures. Lin Feng laughed. On his first day at Celestial River, he had found some spiritual herbs and obtained 3 new treasures. He was particularly happy about the ancient dragon cauldron, which was one of the 10 great cauldrons. Lin Feng felt very lucky. Even though the cauldron didn't seem to be in good shape, except for the carvings which looked alive, it still couldn't be an ordinary object. It was an item shrouded in mystery and secrets. Unfortunately, these 10 ancient cauldrons were too old and Lin Feng didn't know where to find information about them. He didn't know how to use the dragon cauldron either. In the middle of a calm and peaceful night, in a hotel, Lin Feng was in his room, sitting cross-legged on the edge of the bed. He wasn't sleeping, instead, he was investigating his memories as this was his best resource for information. All the memories which had been transmitted to Lin Feng by the cultivator of the Zunqi layer, no matter if they concerned pill concoction or weapon fabrication, were all priceless. They could never be exchanged for something material. The strong cultivator had given a priceless treasure to Lin Feng. At that moment, some footsteps broke the silence which made Lin Feng's closed eyes oscillate. Immediately after, he opened his eyes. Someone knocked at the door. Lin Feng said, sounding indifferent, "Come in." The door opened itself and a beautiful woman appeared at the door. However, it wasn't Meng Qing at all. Besides, Lin Feng had seen that woman during the day. It was Lan Jiao, the alluring young woman. Even though it was the middle of the night, Lan Jiao was still wearing extremely revealing clothing. At that moment, she had already changed her clothes and put on a fire-red dress. Her snowy white shoulders were still uncovered. Her large chest was still partially revealed. The sight was unbearable. It would drive a man crazy with desire. She's such a seductress. An extraordinarily beautiful woman, thought Lin Feng when he saw her figure. He looked a bit surprised though. It was the middle of the night. What did Lan Jiao want? Besides, she was wearing such revealing clothes. Wasn't she scared for her safety? "Mr. Lin, can I come in?" asked Lan Jiao, still waiting at the entrance while smiling. She had such clear and beautiful eyes, they were enchanting. It seemed like she could steal a man's soul. Lin Feng remained silent for a second and then slightly nodded while saying, "Come in." When Lan Jiao heard him, she entered the room and without asking Lin Feng's permission, immediately sat down. She smiled at Lin Feng and said, "Mr. Lin, I'm so sorry for bothering you in the middle of the night." Lin Feng slightly shook his head and said, "Miss, what can I help you with? Am I not allowed to come and visit Mr. Lin without needing something?" said Lan Jiao straightforwardly. She was casting flirtatious glances at Lin Feng and her voice was filled with temptation. "Miss Lan Jiao, you came to my room in the middle of the night. This is not the best moment to visit me. Things cannot be that simple," said Lin Feng smiling. Lan Jiao was visiting Lin Feng in the middle of the night. Was she spying on him? She definitely had ulterior motives. Therefore, Lin Feng's voice also somewhat conveyed sarcasm. "Mr. Lin is insensitive and lacks passion," said Lan Jiao while smiling. She was still staring at Lin Feng in a seducing and alluring way as if she hoped that Lin Feng's heart would eventually melt. But what Lan Jiao didn't know was that Lin Feng could control himself much more than ordinary people when it came to beautiful women. "If I was passionate, I am afraid that you wouldn't be feeling safe right now," said Lin Feng while glancing at her partially revealed chest. His heart was pounding, he was filled with desire. If Lin Feng had a little less willpower and determination, something would definitely get the better of him. "If Mr. Lin feels like being passionate, I don't mind it," said Lan Jiao while smiling. She stood up and walked towards Lin Feng. When she arrived in front of him, all he could see was her white chest. Lan Jiao was doing that on purpose. And it was surprisingly turning him on. Lin Feng didn't know what her motive was though. Since you are vigorously expressing your desire for you to me be passionate, I will be passionate, said Lin Feng, who stood up. He walked towards Lan Jiao, which stupefied her. She couldn't help but take a tiny step backwards, which made Lin Feng smile. Miss Lan, you are seducing me, but you are scared of what I might do. Why is that? Said Lin Feng, sounding indifferent, and then continued. Miss Lan, what is your real purpose for coming here? Lan Jiao was stupefied. Her facial expression was strange. Lin Feng was surprisingly turning a blind eye to her seduction. Could it be that she wasn't seducing enough for him? If you are wondering where Lin Feng's secret powers of seduction come from, look no further. Why do you think that I necessarily have a hidden reason for coming to visit you? Why do you think that I necessarily have a hidden reason for coming to visit you? When Lan Jiao heard Lin Feng, her eyes turned wet and she had a pitiful expression. She took a tiny step forward. Only a few inches were separating her and Lin Feng. Besides, when did I say that I was scared of what you would do? If you like my body, you can have it. Her voice, which was gradually becoming softer and softer, she sounded shy yet was filled with endless temptation. Lin Feng was observing Lan Jiao. She lowered her head and looked extremely shy. Her cheeks turned entirely red. Her dress slowly slid along her shoulders. Her snowy white breasts were becoming more and more revealed. Lin Feng was absolutely captivated by the view. He was staring at her dress, which was sliding down her shoulders. Only a tiny bit more and he would discover what was under her dress. Do you want to see? Asked Lan Jiao, sounding extremely seductive. Lin Feng's heart was like a horse galloping at full speed. He then said, I do. When Lin Feng said that, Lan Jiao's dress had finally started to fall. It slowly slid down her body until it softly landed on the floor. Her plentiful bosom was revealed before Lin Feng's eyes. They were soft and snowy white. They almost looked unreal. Lin Feng wanted to stretch out his hand and gently caress her voluptuous bosom. That thought gave birth to endless desires in his heart. Lin Feng's heart at that moment was burning evilly. A small flame of desire had turned into an inferno. Do you want me, Master Lin? Her voice was filled with endless seduction, and it triggered an explosion in Lin Feng's heart. His heart was filled with a scorching desire. He was unable to free himself from the endless desire. After all, he was still a young man. Apart from Duan Xian Yi, he had never seen the naked body of another woman. He had also never had so much temptation before him. He had the impression that he was going insane. At that moment, Lin Feng's face was entirely red. He slowly raised his hands and moved them towards her plentiful bosom. I can't, thought Lin Feng, alarmed. His hands were hovering in the air. He was sobering up. There's something wrong, this is not right. She was wearing something under her dress. Why would she suddenly be naked right now? Lin Feng could think a little bit more clearly at that moment. He realized that the situation wasn't real. He slightly closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He used earth fusion and started to perceive everything around him. Lin Feng opened his eyes. It seemed like his illusion was slowly dissipating like the moon reflected on a lake. At that moment, Lan Jiao was standing there and smiling. She was still wearing her dress. Even though she was wearing very revealing clothing, she still wasn't naked. A moment ago, Lin Feng had a hallucination. What's going on? Lin Feng's pupils shrank. Everything that had just happened was an illusion, but Lin Feng had the impression that it was absolutely real. Mr. Lin, what are you thinking about? Lan Jiao was staring at Lin Feng. She smiled, but her smile was hiding something deeper. Lin Feng was stupefied. He was speechless. He couldn't tell Lan Jiao that, a moment before, he was thinking about caressing her body, but it had just been an illusion. A moment ago, I saw an illusion, said Lin Feng when he saw that Lan Jiao was smiling. He couldn't be fooled. Lin Feng, in the 6 previous months, had been learning how to condense pure qi, how to concoct pills. He had also learnt about the surplus souls technique. He had been drowning himself in the memories of the strong cultivator. He hadn't practiced cultivation to improve his level of strength, but his power had already reached the peak of the 8th Ling Qi layer. Besides, he could use the earth fusion and had an iron willpower, but he had still been imprisoned in an illusion. Obviously, Lan Jiao had been the one who had used the illusion against him, making his heart abandon itself to desire. That arousing illusion had managed to make him confused. Lan Jiao was extremely strong. She wasn't a simple auctioneer at the Dream Pavilion, it couldn't be that simple. With such strong people, how terrifying was the Dream Pavilion? Miss Lan, even though it was just an illusion, everything I saw was real. It was really your body that I saw. Could it be that you are actually scared of what I might do, which is why you used an illusion? Said Lin Feng, surprisingly admitting what he had seen. You're wrong, said Lan Jiao while smiling. Her seductive eyes were staring at Lin Feng. She then continued. The things that you saw were indeed true, but I just guided the illusion. If you hadn't thought about it and wanted it to go in that direction, it wouldn't have happened that way. Actually, even though the illusion was not real, the things that you saw were real, so you guessed right concerning that part. That had nothing to do with strength, it was just that Lin Feng had been too careless. He hadn't expected to be the victim of an illusion. He didn't even know precisely when the illusion started. Lan Jiao's illusion looked too real, as if illusion and reality had merged together in Lin Feng's mind. So you have displayed your abilities, now tell me why you came, said Lin Feng, sounding indifferent. He had experienced Lan Jiao's power. Next time, he wouldn't be fooled and fall into her trap again. The earth fusion was an incredible dimension, he just had to activate it, and he would be able to perceive everything around him distinctly. Just like a moment before, when he had come back to reality, however, it wouldn't be so simple against a stronger cultivator. Mr. Lin, since you are so impatient to know, I will tell you immediately, said Lan Jiao while smiling. She then continued. Mr. Lin, I came to ask you to join us. Join you? At the Dream Pavilion? Lin Feng was surprised. He hadn't anticipated that she would make such an offer. In a way, but not just that, there is more than just the Dream Pavilion, said Lan Jiao while smiling. Lin Feng's heartbeat accelerated. More than just the Dream Pavilion? What Lan Jiao was probably trying to tell him was that the Dream Pavilion was only a front for their strength, nothing more. I'm sorry, I'm not interested, said Lin Feng, immediately refusing her offer. Lan Jiao's smile became rigid for a second. I'm not done talking. Why do you need to refuse so hastily? Said Lan Jiao while smiling again. She then slowly said, Mr. Lin, if you join us, you will benefit from an infinite amount of cultivation resources, extremely powerful martial skills and agility techniques. You will be able to enjoy all these benefits as much as you wish. Besides, the illusion that you just saw could also become reality. She was trying to seduce him again, martial skills, agility techniques, cultivation resources. Besides, he would also be able to have her, everything was very tempting. I'm sorry, I'm not interested, said Lin Feng while smiling yet sounding stricter, leaving no space for doubt, which surprised Lan Jiao. Not interested? Wasn't he interested in obtaining all the powerful agility techniques and martial skills that he wished? Or wasn't he interested in her? Could it be that Lin Feng didn't find her attractive? She felt a bit hopeless. She was giving her best to entice Lin Feng, but it didn't seem to work at all. She hadn't thought that would be a possibility. Lin Feng didn't need martial skills and agility techniques. He had the memories from the cultivator of the Zun Qi layer. In these memories, there were many powerful martial skills and agility techniques, to the extent that it even had things like the surplus soul technique. Women, except when it came to seduction, couldn't rival Meng Qing when it came to purity and beauty. Even Duan Xine Yu was much better in comparison to Lan Jiao. Besides, she was also more elegant. Joining them also implied less freedom, and he would need to complete certain tasks. Obviously, that wasn't something that Lin Feng desired, therefore he wasn't even considering the offer. Mr. Lin, do you know who the person was that saved Lung Yu? You shouldn't have provoked them. Your life might be in danger now, said Lan Jiao, sounding like she wasn't about to give up. Are you done talking? Said Lin Feng while staring at Lan Jiao. Because Lin Feng didn't agree, even though she was saying such tempting things, she was now trying to scare him. Lan Jiao was stupefied. Lin Feng continued. If you are done talking, just leave. You are a girl and you are in my room. If people noticed, then their rumors would be spread. Maybe you don't care about those rumors, but I do care, said Lin Feng. Lan Jiao was fixedly staring at him. She looked offended. Humph, groaned Lan Jiao. She was furiously glaring at Lin Feng. Then she left Lin Feng's room. In the middle of the night, outside of the Celestial Mountain restaurant, some people were walking by. In the middle of the night, outside of the Celestial Mountain restaurant, some people were walking by. What a seductive lady, how pretty! When they saw Lan Jiao run away from the restaurant, a drunk man walked towards her. Oh, such a beauty, how white! Ha ha ha! That drunk man was staring at Lan Jiao's breasts and looked evilly. Is that so? Do you want to see? Said Lan Jiao while smiling. The drunk man's eyes suddenly became particularly brilliant. He was drooling. I do. The crowd was fixedly staring at Lan Jiao. Well, all of you look carefully, said Lan Jiao with a bewitching smile on her face immediately after. Her dress slowly slid down her body, which made them all breathless for a second. They were fixedly staring at these two snowy white breasts. However, a moment after, they stopped seeing her breasts, which they desired so much. Instead, blood splashed through the atmosphere. A few horrible shrieks broke the silence of the night. All those who had been looking at Lan Jiao were dead on the ground. Some people came see what was happening. There was a wave of cold qi in the atmosphere. It was very cold. People didn't dare look at Lan Jiao anymore though. They wouldn't be able to seduce such an attractive woman. In the distance, a group of white silhouettes were approaching. They were carrying a palanquin. There were 4 people and they were all wearing white clothes. They looked extremely nimble and were extremely quick. These pure and holy white silhouettes seemed like they were flying through the air, which made them look like ghosts or celestial beings. In a flash, they arrived in front of the crowd. However, at that moment they disappeared and instantly appeared in the distance and then vanished onto the horizon. How fast! The crowd was astonished. They had disappeared in a flash. What about the attractive girl? Said someone surprised. Immediately after, the crowd turned around and looked in Lan Jiao's direction. They were astonished there was nobody. Lan Jiao surprisingly had disappeared too. And that palanquin? The enigmatic white silhouettes were, as before, on the road, shuttling back and forth. On the palanquin, there was a beautiful middle-aged woman looking at Lan Jiao with a fake smile on her face. She said, "Why is Jiao Jiao so furious?" "Aunt Yun, your suggestion was stupid," said Lan Jiao, sounding annoyed. She had a long face. "Why? How come? Considering how seductive you are, you didn't manage to tempt him?" asked Aunt Yun while smiling. "Aunt Yun, I perfectly know that you are making fun of me. That bastard will see," said Lan Jiao while hitting her fist in the palm of her other hand. Her eyes were filled with hatred. Lin Feng was detestable. She had used her 1,000 evil illusions skill and Lin Feng had remained unaffected. She had even showed him her own body. She felt humiliated. Her face had been slapped. "Jiao Jiao, haven't you studied the 1,000 evil illusions? Coupled with your cultivation level and your beauty, how could you lose?" said Aunt Yun. Lan Jiao was stupefied and said, "How could I use the 1,000 evil illusions against him? Besides, I said that I had learnt that skill, but it was just a joke, nothing more." "Don't misunderstand," said Lan Jiao while lowering her head. She didn't dare look at Aunt Yun. She felt ashamed. She didn't seem to be the same woman as when she was facing Lin Feng. At that moment she looked like a little girl. "Is that so?" said Aunt Yun while smiling. Her smile seemed deep and profound. "No wonder you were defeated. Lin Feng has set a city on fire, traveled into another country to save the princess. His willpower and determination are tempered like steel. Jiao Jiao, if you had submitted yourself to him directly, I would have despised him." Huh. Lan Jiao was surprised. She had actually really used the 1,000 evil illusions, and on top of that, it was the first time that she used it. However, she had lost, that's why she was furious. The scariest part was Lin Feng's last words. He had said that she didn't care about her reputation, but he did care about his. It made her look cheap and shameless. But Aunt Yun's opinion made sense in a way. If she had submitted herself to Lin Feng, she wouldn't have been so alluring any longer. That is why she had used the 1,000 evil illusions, which was extremely powerful. Lin Feng falling for it was a normal thing. "Jiao Jiao, it's been a few days. Now that the news is already spreading amongst those at the top, the treasure has come to light, but we don't know anything else, that's all. Wait for a few more days and we will hear. After receiving the treasure, you will not need to stay here anymore. Your training will come to an end," said Aunt Yun, sounding mysterious. Lan Jiao had been in Celestial River for a long time. "Go back," whispered Lan Jiao. She looked perplexed. On the second day, in the Dream Pavilion, there were still 10 objects to be sold at the auction. One of the things which amazed the crowd the most was a D-level skill. Even though it was lower quality, it was still a D-level skill. They were brutally strong. That wasn't a skill which you could find anywhere. Apart from a large influential group or sect, ordinary people relied on themselves to gain benefits. It was very difficult for them to acquire skills of the D level and above. In the Dream Pavilion, a D level skill had appeared. Of course, it was making the crowd go wild. In the end, it was obtained by someone who spent 10,000 purity stones of medium quality to acquire it. It was a monstrous price. Besides, there were other treasures in that auction sale. A spiritual weapon. It was a spiritual weapon of medium quality. Someone bought it for 10,000 purity stones of medium quality as well. After the end of the auction, Lan Jiao looked at the booth where Lin Feng had been on the day before. At that moment, there was nobody in that broken booth. Lin Feng hadn't come to pick up his purity stones either. Where is Lin Feng? At that moment, an angry voice and loud shout spread through the atmosphere. A silhouette was flying through the air towards the auction room. People in the crowd were immediately moving aside to open the way. Immediately after, that silhouette landed onto the ground and released some deadly qi which astonished the crowd. They were all looking at the entrance of the auction room. They only saw a majestic-looking young man who was bald, and there was a black burn on their head. It looked horrible, but nobody dared make fun of them. People who were near him were moving backwards, fearing that he would get furious and kill them. Lin Feng, show yourself, shouted the man coldly. It seems like Tujio has come for the essence fire, thought the people in the crowd. On the day before, Lin Feng had killed Bing Yuan and had made Leng Yu move back with one sword strike. His name was already famous in Celestial River. Many people knew who he was. Lin Feng was known for all the insane things that he had done. That outstanding young man was the amazing hero who had set a city on fire. No wonder he was that aggressive and had immediately killed Bing Yuan. Besides, he had nearly killed Leng Yu as well. However, even though his name had become famous, it also meant more trouble. Everybody knew that he had stolen the beast essence fire. Besides, he had many enemies in Celestial River. Tujio was one of them. Besides, he particularly liked that foxfire. What scared people as well was that Tujio had a deep background in Celestial River. He didn't fear Lin Feng, even if a cultivator of the Xianqi layer was with him. Lan Jiao frowned. She saw Tujio and thought, Lin Feng, what will you do this time? Tujio had an influential background. He was extremely strong and was close to a breakthrough into the Xianqi layer. Bing Yuan and Leng Yu were weaklings in comparison. Bing Yuan had acquired the foxfire. Instead of leaving Celestial River, he decided to try and kill Lin Feng. In the end, he had lost his life instead. Lan Jiao returned into the back room of the auction. Aunt Yun then said in a low voice, Jiao Jiao, Lin Feng hasn't come yet to pick up his purity stones. You could deliver them to him. Ah. Lan Jiao was stupefied. Help Lin Feng and bring the purity stones to him? All right. I have the purity stones. Let's see how he will receive me, said Lan Jiao. Jiao Jiao, you cannot violate the rules of the Dream Pavilion, said Aunt Yun while shaking her head and smiling. Don't worry, Aunt Yun. I will just make him undergo some hardships, said Lan Jiao, who was thinking of a plan to deal with Lin Feng. Her eyes were twinkling. Aunt Yun handed the purity stones to Lan Jiao. Lan Jiao immediately left afterwards. While looking at her vanishing silhouette, Aunt Yun smiled and said, Jiao Jiao, you need someone to set rules for you. Otherwise you're too disobedient. Lan Jiao left the auction and headed towards Lin Feng. Tujio had also learned that Lin Feng wasn't there. He was determined to go to every corner of the city to look for him. He had to obtain that beast's essence fire. Besides, at the same time, in the ice and snow mountain village, which was covered with snow, a group of white horses were galloping at full speed towards the mountain, leaving their footprints in the snow. It seemed like they didn't feel cold at all. The best core disciple of the ice and snow mountain village had been killed in Celestial River. That was shocking news for everybody in the village. In the Celestial Restaurant, Lin Feng sat at a table, drinking while lost in thought. In the Celestial Restaurant, Lin Feng sat at a table, drinking while lost in thought. He didn't feel like rushing to the Dream Pavilion to collect his purity stones. The dream pavilion wasn't going to disappear anytime soon. Have you heard that recently there's a treasure that has appeared in Celestial River? Said a soft voice. It drew many people's attention. What do you mean by recently? How long ago? I also heard that there's a treasure here but nobody has found it. How could that really be the case? It would have caused people to talk and the news would have spread. Everybody would have been talking about it in Celestial River. The news would have spread quickly. It's just not the way you think it is, that's all. Every treasure is different. Not every treasure has the same reaction. These two people were both gossiping about the latest rumors. They were speaking more and more loudly, as if they feared that other people couldn't hear their discussion. A treasure? Does the ancient dragon cauldron count as one? Lin Feng said while smiling and shaking his head. Lin Feng. At that moment a voice shouted his name, surprising Lin Feng. He looked down and saw Lan Jiao. Lin Feng was suspicious. What did she want? Lin Feng. The people in the restaurant were stupefied. They followed Lan Jiao's eyes and saw Lin Feng. He was Lin Feng? He was the genius who killed Bing Yuan and defeated Leng Yu with one sword attack? Lan Jiao went up to the first floor and walked towards Lin Feng. She didn't look furious any longer. Her seductive smile appeared on her face again. Lan Jiao walked towards Lin Feng's table and said, Lin Feng, are you not happy to see me? Lin Feng raised his head, looked at Lan Jiao and indifferently said, You are wearing more clothing today, you don't feel like showing me your body anymore? Lan Jiao was exasperated. A cruel expression appeared in her eyes. What would the others who heard that think about her? What a bastard! Lin Feng, I have your 20,000 purity stones of medium quality, Lan Jiao said while smiling coldly. Lin Feng was making fun of her, so she wanted to teach him a lesson. Hand them over, Lin Feng said while sipping on his drink, looking indifferent. Lan Jiao was stupefied again. Do you think that it will be that easy? Lan Jiao said while smiling coldly. Lin Feng slowly raised his head and said, Is that how the Dream Pavilion handles their affairs? This is my way of doing things and it has nothing to do with the Dream Pavilion. If you want your purity stones, you have to make me happy. Lan Jiao said while smiling coldly. Lin Feng was fixedly staring at her, and looked absolutely expressionless, which made Lan Jiao feel uneasy. Give them to me, said Lin Feng, sounding ice cold. Some cold chi surrounded Lan Jiao's body. That coldness made Lan Jiao stop smiling. She gnashed her teeth and said, What if I don't give them to you? If you don't give them to me? Lin Feng said while looking ice cold. He stood up, released some more ice cold chi and said, I advise you to think carefully. Lan Jiao was blankly staring at Lin Feng, her face turning red. Lin Feng's pupils shrank. He didn't understand Lan Jiao's facial expression. What did it mean? That woman had used an illusion skill on him during the night. She even tried to scare him. All of this gave birth to aversion in Lin Feng's heart. He didn't feel like talking to her anymore. And then at that moment she had come to him and was threatening to not give him his purity stones. Lin Feng found all of this terribly annoying. Lin Feng, you're such a bastard, Lan Jiao said while throwing a small bag onto Lin Feng's table. Immediately after, she turned around and left. Lan Jiao was starting to hate Lin Feng. During the night, she had used the 1,000 evil illusions on him, and it had not worked at all. Then at this moment, she had just gone to the restaurant to give Lin Feng his purity stones. She was just teasing him. She was hoping to apologize to Lin Feng, but he immediately threatened her and released some cold chi as if he did not want to waste time speaking with her. Her heart felt painful. She also had another purpose for coming. She didn't feel like admitting it, but she had actually come to give him a warning. Tujio was looking for Lin Feng. He wanted to take his beast essence fire. She feared that he wouldn't need much time before he would find Lin Feng at the Celestial Mountain restaurant. Lan Jiao was leaving the restaurant and insulting Lin Feng in her thoughts. That bastard should just die, she didn't care. Tujio definitely wanted to kill Lin Feng. Lan Jiao hadn't known Lin Feng for a long time, but she knew that he would never hand over the beast essence fire. Therefore, Tujio would definitely kill him. I will let you die then. Cruel thoughts were passing through Lan Jiao's mind, but her steps were getting slower with each thought. She then stopped. She was lost and didn't know what to do. I can't. Wouldn't it be bad to let Lin Feng die to Tujio? Lan Jiao thought. She then slowly turned around. Indeed, she didn't want to let Lin Feng die that way. She started taking quick and large strides, almost running back to the restaurant. She arrived in front of Lin Feng. "You came back again. What do you want?" Lin Feng said when he saw Lan Jiao. He was surprised and didn't understand what she wanted. Lan Jiao gnashed her teeth. She was fixedly staring at Lin Feng before she said, "You should leave as soon as possible. There is someone who is coming to kill you." "Kill me?" Lin Feng said, surprised. He then immediately smiled and said, "Many people want to kill me. This time it's not the same. It's Tujio. He wants to take the beast essence fire away from you. Tujio is at the peak of the Lingqi layer. Nobody of the Lingqi layer can fight against him. If you don't give him the beast essence fire, he will kill you," warned Lan Jiao. "At the peak of the Lingqi layer? Nobody of the Lingqi layer can fight against him?" whispered Lin Feng. Lin Feng was curious to see if a cultivator of the peak of the Lingqi layer could kill him if he didn't hand over the beast essence fire. When Lan Jiao saw that Lin Feng was smiling, she couldn't help but shout, "Tujio could find you any time now. You should leave as quickly as possible or he will kill you." When Lin Feng heard Lan Jiao, he raised his head and surprisingly smiled at her. Lan Jiao had been kind to come back and warn him. It seemed like he had misunderstood her, but Lin Feng still disliked her behavior. "I'm sorry," Lin Feng said while looking apologetic. Lan Jiao was surprised. That bastard was using this moment to apologize. "You will not be able to escape unless you hurry up and leave, bastard," cursed Lan Jiao. Lin Feng wasn't moving at all. Lin Feng slowly shook his head and then heard a voice coming from outside. "No need to try and leave, that won't be possible." When Lan Jiao heard that ice-cold voice, her facial expression became rigid. It was over for Lin Feng. That bastard had not listened to her and chose not to escape while he had the chance. "Lin Feng, get your ass over here," a loud voice shouted, filling the atmosphere and sharply pierced people's eardrums. The people in the restaurant were shocked. Surprisingly, someone dared talk that way to Lin Feng, after everything that he was known for. Lin Feng was surprised as well. Who was Tujio? Why was he that arrogant? Lin Feng stood up and started walking. He was slowly walking down the stairs and then he left the restaurant. At that moment, outside of the restaurant there were many people, but most of them were watching from afar. There was a single bald man who looked aggressive and imposing. He was staring at Lin Feng and the expression in his eyes was sharp. "Are you Lin Feng?" said Tujio coldly as he looked at Lin Feng. "Indeed. It seems that you and me are not enemies, right?" said Lin Feng indifferently. "Indeed, we are not enemies. Hand over the foxfire. Then, screw off and I will pretend as if nothing happened," threatened Tujio. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes. Tujio had come to find Lin Feng. His behavior made him look majestic and imposing. Nobody within the Lingqi layer could fight against him, and he was not scared of a cultivator in the Xianqi layer. He also had a powerful background, which is why he was acting so rudely. "You want the beast essence fire?" Lin Feng said, a bit surprised. He then coldly continued, "I obtained the essence fire when I killed Bing Yuan. If you want it, I can give it to you in exchange for something else. If you have something of worth, you can obtain it." "You want the beast essence fire?" Lin Feng said, a bit surprised. He then coldly continued, "I obtained the essence fire when I killed Bing Yuan. If you want it, I can give it to you in exchange for something else. If you have something of worth, you can obtain it." "Are you trying to negotiate with me?" Tujio said while smiling evilly. "In Celestial River, almost nobody can disobey me. All the people of the Lingqi layer who dare contradict me die. I advise you to think it over. What do you prefer, your life or the essence fire?" When the people in the crowd heard that, they shook their heads. How brutally aggressive. That guy was at the peak of the Lingqi layer. He was invincible below the Xianqi layer. Besides, he had incredible power in Celestial River, so people who dared to offend him were not high in number. Lin Feng surprisingly dared to provoke Tujio. If he didn't accept to hand over the essence fire, he would unfortunately lose his life. "Do you want to die, or do you want to hand over the essence fire?" Tujio said, giving Lin Feng a choice. Lin Feng was calmly standing there. He coldly glanced at Tujio and said, "All those who say that they will kill me usually end up getting killed by me, for example Bing Yuan. So now what do you prefer? Getting out of my sight or dying here? Leave or die? Everybody was stupefied. Not only had Lin Feng not replied to Tu Jiu, but he was also giving his own options. He even looked calm and frivolous. Lin Feng was threatening Tu Jiu in Celestial River. Did Tu Jiu want to leave or did he want to die? That was audacious enough. You are going to die, said Lan Jiao, who was standing behind Lin Feng. Lin Feng was insane. Bing Yuan was very strong and was a disciple of the Ice and Snow Mountain village, but Tu Jiu was much stronger. He was at the very summit of the Ling Qi layer. His strength was monstrously close to breaking through to the Xian Qi layer. Not only was Lin Feng not acting docile, but he was also threatening Tu Jiu. Did he want to die? As expected, when Tu Jiu heard Lin Feng, an evil smile appeared on his face. He then evilly said, "You are the first cultivator of the Ling Qi layer who dares to threaten me in Celestial River. Therefore, your death will be brutal and painful," Tu Jiu said while gesticulating, his smile looking ice-cold and cruel. "Arf!" roared Tu Jiu, sounding like a ferocious beast. Immediately after, his body transformed into a black shadow and vanished. His right hand had transformed into a claw, and he started to balance on a single foot. Tu Jiu's claws started moving towards Lin Feng, emitting a white light which filled the atmosphere. That horrible beast-like claw was going to skewer Lin Feng. This claw was extremely fast as it rushed towards Lin Feng. It could easily skewer people's flesh and muscles. Coming into contact with it would leave deep wounds on one's body. Lin Feng was going to die for having offended Tu Jiu. That was inevitable. The crowd was silent. Lin Feng noticed that this swift and fierce claw was moving towards him. He was a bit surprised. He had the feeling that what he was facing at that moment was a ferocious beast, an eagle-type beast. Surplus souls appeared in the atmosphere. They all had looked like smaller versions of Lin Feng's soul, and they copied his movements. At the same time, these dark souls all slowly raised their finger and thrust towards the claw as a power emerged from these souls. Lin Feng was not dodging, on the contrary, he was attacking with a single finger. Clying! A subtle metallic sound spread in the atmosphere. When the claw collided with Lin Feng's attack, they were both forced back a few steps. Tu Jiu's hand was still in the form of eagle claw, but in the middle of his palm, there was a red drop of blood. A moment before, Lin Feng's finger had been perfectly accurate. Besides, it had also managed to pierce through as if it had been a sword. Lin Feng had a mark on his hand. Even though Tu Jiu's claw had not touched him, the power of the claw had left a mark on his hand. Besides, his fingers were feeling numb as well. Tu Jiu's claw was extremely sharp, and he was much stronger than Lin Feng assumed. "You're good, but as before you will die," Tu Jiu said with an evil smile. Something strange was happening. A light flashed around his body, and at that moment, it seemed like he turned into a hideous eagle with extremely sharp claws. The sight was shocking to watch. "Oh!" Tu Jiu was emitting some piercing cries. He started moving through the air, many shadows appearing. They all belonged to Tu Jiu. An incredible white light invaded the atmosphere. It seemed like multiple of Tu Jiu's shadows were moving towards Lin Feng with their claws, aiming to kill. The entire atmosphere was filled with his shadows. It was difficult to distinguish if they were real or fake. The white light flashed in front of Lin Feng's eyes. He slightly inclined his body to one side and the white light hurtled by him at incredible speed, not hurting him at all. But immediately after, the endless and evil white light grew even brighter as the attacks continued. Lin Feng's silhouette slightly flickered. Each of his steps were perfect, soft and agile. That way, he was able to avoid the attacks which were supposed to be deadly. At that moment, Lin Feng looked elegant, agile and skillful. He was in the middle of an endless flurry of claw strikes, shuttling back and forth. He was dodging these strikes with extreme skill. "Oh!" A sharp sound spread in the atmosphere. The myriad of white lights merged together and transformed into a pair of gigantic claws. It really seemed like it belonged to a gigantic and monstrously strong ferocious beast. It seemed like these gigantic claws were over a meter in size. Lin Feng was directly under one of these claws and had nowhere to go. He could not escape. It's almost the end. Lin Feng is going to die. People in the crowd were looking at Tu Jiu. He really looked like an evil beast. Lin Feng was a prisoner under these claws. He was going to be ripped into pieces. Lan Jiao's mouth was wide open, her face was deathly pale. Lin Feng was really going to die. Lin Feng's silhouette was completely enveloped by the claws. He was looking at Tu Jiu, who looked like an evil eagle, and coldly smiled. An incredible purple energy burst forth. It looked like a huge purple lake. Then countless purple tentacles appeared and rushed through the air towards the claws, entangling them and restricted them. Immediately after, the claws were completely drowned in the purple spirit. At that moment, the claws were still descending towards Lin Feng. However, Lin Feng's purple lake was blocking the trajectory of the claws. The claws had been completely covered by the purple lake. Ah! A horrible shriek filled the air. The claws disappeared. Tu Jiu raised his hand. His cruel-looking face was deathly pale. At that moment there was flesh bubbling and melting on his hand. His skin had been peeled off and his flesh had started to melt. The bones and muscles on his hand were now visible. It looked extremely painful. A moment before, the purple lake had melted part of his hand. At that moment, behind Lin Feng's back, there was the purple lake which was now emitting some bubbling sounds. Besides, there was a purple tentacle weaving through the air like a snake. People were shivering at the sight. Tu Jiu was at the peak of the Ling Qi layer? No cultivator of the Ling Qi layer could defeat him? How amazing! Thought the people in the crowd at that moment when they saw Lin Feng. That purple lake was monstrously strong. The evil eagle's claws had melted and Tu Jiu had been injured. Lan Jiao was also looking at Lin Feng. She was blinking her beautiful eyes. Could it be that she had been too worried about Lin Feng? I want you to die, shouted Tu Jiu, sounding glum while staring at Lin Feng. I gave you two choices: to get the hell out of my sight or to die. You didn't leave, so you will die. Lin Feng said, sounding ice cold, his face filled with killing intent. At that moment he was calm. His heart was filled with pride and determination. I will die, Tu Jiu said while smiling coldly. I know everything there is to know about the Ling Qi layer. I seldom have opponents. Apart from relying on my spirit and my claws, I can also rely on something much stronger. I am able to use pure qi. I am a hair away from the Xian Qi layer and can condense pure qi. We will see how you intend to block my next attack. An incredible light started to gather around Tu Jiu's body. A ball of light appearing in his hand, it looked like it was a ball of pure lightning. Some thunderous boom spread in the atmosphere. The ball was filled with deadly qi. There isn't only pure deadly qi, there is also some pure lightning qi. When the crowd saw that move, they were stupefied. Tu Jiu was using his best move against Lin Feng. No cultivator of the Ling Qi layer could resist an attack from pure qi. Lin Feng was very strong and had high talent, but under the power of a pure qi attack, which was generally used by cultivators of the Xian Qi layer, he would be exterminated. What a pity! He was such a genius and he was going to die so tragically. But Lin Feng was, as before, not worried. He was calm and was looking at Tu Jiu. He then slowly said, "You're always the one who attacks everyone first, shouldn't we take turns? Now it should be my turn." Huh. The crowd was stupefied. Take turns? The opponent already had a ball of pure lightning qi in his hand, but Lin Feng wanted to take turns? Immediately after, they saw Lin Feng had started walking. In a flash, an incredible battle energy spread across the sky and consumed the atmosphere. It was burning and whirling around Lin Feng's body in the battle energy. There was something sharp. It was sword energy. Lin Feng slowly raised his hand. A whistling sound emerged in the atmosphere. An insanely strong white hurricane of energy appeared. That white hurricane progressively transformed into an extremely sharp sword. It was filled with brutally strong and piercing qi. The light emitted by that sword was dazzling to the eyes, making everyone who saw it close their eyes for a moment. A sword made of pure qi. The crowd was astonished. Their hearts were pounding. That white sword was illuminating the entire area, and it was made out of condensed pure qi. Tu Jiu had created a ball of lightning using pure qi and Lin Feng created a sword. Attacks using pure qi were mysterious and hard to grasp, but Lin Feng had never given up and practiced with tenacity until he could master condensing of pure qi to a perfect state. He had managed to reach perfection and was thus able to create a sword from condensed pure qi. What a terrifying guy! The crowd was dumbstruck. Both of the fighters were using pure qi to fight. One was a ball of terrifying lightning while the other was a dazzling sword. Who was going to win that battle? Our world is extremely vast, who can say that they are invincible? Especially when you are so young and have only broken through to the Ling Qi layer. Not only are you shameless but you are also ignorant. Being such a fool. So pitiful, so sad. Lin Feng was staring at Tu Jiu and continued, sounding cold and detached. The pure qi that you're using to create your lightning is condensed from the qi of the natural world. However, the pure qi of my sword, I condensed it myself. I've been slowly condensing it step by step until I could slowly forge a sword of pure qi. I will show you how pitiful you are for thinking that no cultivator of the Ling Qi layer was worth your time. Lin Feng's words pierced through Tu Jiu's arrogance and raised doubts in his heart. He was starting to doubt his own abilities. Besides, Lin Feng's battle energy had invaded the atmosphere as well. It was in a constant battle with the energy in the atmosphere. His sword seemed like it would cut down anything in its way. Lin Feng took a step and suddenly disappeared. Immediately after, a sword made of pure qi appeared before Tu Jiu and descended from the sky, cutting through anything in its path. The incredible sword illuminated the entire atmosphere. It contained an endless quantity of pure sword qi, deadly qi, and even some battle energy was surrounding it. The incredible sword illuminated the entire atmosphere. It contained an endless quantity of pure sword qi, deadly qi, and even some battle energy was surrounding it. That sword was an incredibly deadly weapon. Its power was monstrous. Tu Jiu was gasping with astonishment. His ball of pure lightning qi was bombarding the atmosphere and moving towards Lin Feng's sword. Crackling sounds were followed by loud roars of thunder. The lightning were colliding with the sword made of pure qi. But the ball of lightning made from pure qi was unable to block the incoming sword attack. Lin Feng's sword was descending from the sky and piercing towards its target. A cracking sound emerged in the air. The lightning made from pure qi was pierced. The insanely brutal pure qi dispersed in all directions, creating a shockwave of pure qi. I don't want the beast essence fire anymore, shouted Tu Jiu. He was unable to block the sword made from pure qi. If Lin Feng didn't stop his attack, he would really be able to kill Tu Jiu, so Tu Jiu had to find a way out. He's giving up. Tu Jiu is giving up. The crowd was astonished. The strong and powerful Tu Jiu, who was extremely aggressive, had come to find Lin Feng because he wanted to steal the beast essence fire. Everybody had thought that Lin Feng, even if he didn't die, would at least lose the essence fire. When they had heard Lin Feng refuse Tu Jiu, they had been convinced that he would die. But the astonishing result was that Tu Jiu, who couldn't be defeated by any other cultivator of the Ling Qi layer, couldn't rival Lin Feng's power. Lin Feng had defeated him using his pure qi sword. At that moment, Tu Jiu, who was at the peak of the Ling Qi layer, had given up. He wasn't fighting anymore, and decided that he no longer needed any of Lin Feng's items. What to do?" said Lin Feng while smiling coldly. Tu Jiu thought that things were really that easy. If he wanted to fight, then he'd fight. He wanted to kill Lin Feng and take the beast essence fire, but because he couldn't defeat Lin Feng, he thought that everything would be solved if he just gave up on wanting to steal from Lin Feng. How could it be that easy? Would he accept if someone did that to him? Lin Feng had told him to choose, leave or die. I am from the Condor Castle of Celestial River. Would you dare to kill me and see what happens? Said Tu Jiu when he saw that Lin Feng's sword was still falling from the sky. The sword was slowly piercing through the pure qi and was growing faster and faster. His facial expression had changed drastically. Tu Jiu dared act aggressively and arrogantly in Celestial River because he was incredibly strong, but also because he came from the Condor Castle, which had a certain power in Celestial River. The Condor Castle was a corrupt organization. People who dared offend them were all mercilessly killed. The Condor Castle organization was based within Celestial River territory. They offended many minor people with minor influences in Celestial River, but they were unable to react unless they had enough backing. The crowd was also dumbstruck. Was he going to kill Tu Jiu? They had never thought about such a possibility until that moment. Even though the Haoyu sect was not far from Celestial River, in Celestial River, people of the Haoyu sect, and even of the Ice and Snow Mountain village, didn't dare offend the people of Condor Castle. The Condor Castle organization had deep roots in Celestial River. It had existed for countless years and they were truly ruthless. In order to dismantle it, you would need to remove it from the roots, which was almost impossible, so it was best not to anger them. Since you wanted to kill me, you should have thought that I might kill you too, said Lin Feng, sounding cold. The crowd were astonished. The sword made from pure qi pierced through the last remaining bit of pure lightning qi. It then moved directly towards Tu Jiu. How dare you? Shouted a voice which resonated through the entire atmosphere. Tu Jiu looked at the sword that was piercing towards him from the sky. He looked hopeless and his heart was filled with regret. People of the Condor Castle organization had gotten used to acting imposing and arrogant in Celestial River. Therefore, he had never thought that he would ever be in such a situation. He had never thought that anyone would dare kill him in Celestial River. At that moment he was doomed. Everything had happened too quickly. The light from the deadly pure qi of Lin Feng's sword was gradually vanishing. Tu Jiu was standing there motionless. Immediately after, his body slowly collapsed. Tu Jiu's eyes were still open, but between his eyebrows, a sword had pierced his skull and a thread of blood was flowing. He was dead. Tu Jiu of the Condor Castle organization had died. He was at the peak of the Ling Qi layer and had killed by Lin Feng in one sword strike. He hadn't even been able to touch Lin Feng even though he had the power to use pure qi, which was the power of the Xian Qi layer. The result exceeded all expectations. It was astonishing. Many people were still excited. Lan Jiao, who was behind Lin Feng, was dumbstruck as well. A moment after, she took a deep breath and looked at the back of the domineering young man. Her beautiful eyes were filled with surprise. What an unwavering and determined young man. He wanted to kill Lin Feng, so Lin Feng had killed him. Lin Feng didn't care about his status. Lan Jiao frowned and started walking. She arrived at Lin Feng's side and said, Lin Feng, you should leave as soon as possible. Hurry and leave. Leave. Lin Feng looked at Lan Jiao, shook his head and said, Why would I leave? You will get killed, said Lan Jiao. Tu Jiu was a member of the Condor Castle organization. Besides, he had a very high status. You killed him, so the members of the Condor Castle organization will not let you off. They will quickly come for you. The Condor Castle organization? Lin Feng frowned. He had an appointment with Mr. Hua in the restaurant. He couldn't leave. I am not leaving, said Lin Feng, sounding indifferent. Lan Jiao was stupefied and insulting Lin Feng in her thoughts. That guy took too many risks for nothing. Lin Feng, you just want to die, said Lan Jiao furiously. Lin Feng was surprised. He looked at Lan Jiao and immediately said, Why are you so worried about me? Lan Jiao was stupefied. Indeed, what was wrong with her? Why was she worried about that bastard? She was supposed to hate Lin Feng. She initially wanted him to die. Why was she helping him? I'm worried about you, but you're right. If you want to die, it's none of my goddamn business, cursed Lan Jiao. She seemed to be revealing her true nature, which was completely different from the other night. Lin Feng looked at Lan Jiao, who was leaving furiously. He started walking and went into the Celestial Mountain restaurant. People in the crowd were shaking their heads. A beautiful woman was warning him, but he couldn't differentiate good from bad. It seemed like this time he was definitely going to die. The Condor Castle organization was dangerous. They had a lot of influence in Celestial River. Besides, they were comprised of thousands of people, and except for the younger generations, they had all broken through to the Ling Qi layer. There were almost no weak cultivators. Besides, the 3 leaders of the organization had broken through to the Xian Qi layer. They were extremely powerful, especially the main leader. He had already broken through to the 3rd Xian Qi layer. His power was monstrous to the extent that people who dared provoke him were extremely rare. Even though Lin Feng was very strong and had high natural talent, provoking the Condor Castle organization was no better than courting death. The crowd in the distance hadn't left yet. The news that Tu Jiu had died would spread quickly, and they wanted to see what would happen now that Lin Feng had decided to not leave. Just as the crowd had predicted, not such a long time after, rumbling noises emerged in the distance and the ground was shaking from the horses in the distance. It sounded like a small army of horses galloping. They arrived. People's hearts were pounding. The people of the Condor Castle organization had arrived very quickly. Lin Feng will die. When the crowd heard the rumbling noises, they understood that it was the Condor Castle organization who had come to get their revenge. The Condor Castle organization would definitely kill Lin Feng. A moment later, a group of cavalry on black horses were galloping towards them. They all looked evil and aggressive. The people of the Condor Castle organization were all the most evil and ruthless cultivators. They had so much blood on their hands, the numbers of people they had killed in cold blood would never wash away. They were like Tujiu. If they saw someone who had something that they wanted, if the person didn't hand it over, they killed them. They were extremely evil and aggressive. They had no principles and no moral values at all. Many people were rushing out from the Celestial Mountain restaurant. They had heard that the Condor Castle organization had come to avenge Tujiu's death. They would of course hide in the distance to avoid any unfortunate incident. A short time after, the Celestial Mountain restaurant had turned completely silent. Besides, in the distance, over 100 cavalry on their armored horses had almost arrived. When they saw Tujiu's corpse lying on the road, the leader's facial expression became ice cold and his eyes, which looked like those of an eagle, looked extremely sharp. That person was Tujiu's uncle, once of the vice leaders of the Condor Castle organization. "Get out here, you will die," said the vice leader of the Condor Castle organization. They all galloped towards the Celestial Mountain restaurant and immediately started destroying everything in their path. How strong and powerful! The crowd was astonished. In the distance, a thick bronze sign exploded. The leader of the Condor Castle organization had shouted and his voice contained powerful pure chi. Inside the Celestial Mountain restaurant, the atmosphere was absolutely silent. There wasn't a single noise. The crowd was silently observing the scene. The people of the Condor Castle organization had stopped outside restaurant, waiting for Lin Feng, and Lin Feng was obviously not going to come out, otherwise he would die. What they were asking was obviously impossible. "Surround it," said the vice leader of the Condor Castle organization. In a flash, the horses encircled the Celestial Mountain restaurant. The vice leader was in the distance and was staring at the restaurant with murder in his face. "Surround it," said the vice leader of the Condor Castle organization. In a flash, the horses encircled the Celestial Mountain restaurant. The vice leader was in the distance and was staring at the restaurant with murder in his face. "Go inside and capture him, I want him alive," said the vice leader. "Roger," said some cavalry in unison. They immediately passed through the entrance of the restaurant. Immediately after, the few cavalry arrived in the middle of the restaurant. However, immediately after having entering the restaurant, an incredibly heavy energy spread through the atmosphere which made their heartbeats accelerate. A blade-like wind suddenly appeared. It was surrounded by an incredible energy. Horrible shrieks spread through the atmosphere. The few silhouettes at the back of the group were blown out of the restaurant. At the front of the group, some people wanted to leave but were blocked by the people behind. It was too chaotic, they were panicking, and suddenly blood splashed everywhere. Explosive sounds were unceasingly spreading through the atmosphere. Many people were collapsing onto the ground, including the first to enter the restaurant. They were dead. That move astonished the crowd. Lin Feng had forced them enter the restaurant, and when they did, he killed them. The people of the Condor Castle organization didn't dare enter the restaurant anymore. Instead, they were irresolutely pacing back and forth in front of the entrance door of the restaurant. The people inside were clearly dangerous. If he had killed Tujiu, that definitely meant that he wasn't weak. If he was alone, only the vice leader of the Condor Castle organization could defeat him. "Get in formation and go inside to capture him, don't move back," said the vice leader of the Condor Castle organization coldly when he saw that his group was completely chaotic. Weren't they able to capture a single person with so many of them? The members of the Condor Castle organization were stupefied. They looked fierce and tough. Immediately after, they came back in formation and started galloping towards the inside of the restaurant. At the same time, rumbling noises spread in the atmosphere. There was no blade light and nobody had shown themselves. The entire unit of cavalry charged into the restaurant like a stampede. The vice leader of the Condor Castle organization smiled coldly. Those who dared kill the people of the Condor Castle organization had to die. Ah! A horrible shriek spread in the air which made the vice leader's smile become rigid. At the same time, people outside were also astonished. A purple light burst forth from the restaurant. There was a bubbling and foaming sound. The light was getting more and more intense. The crowd could see a purple light coming from the inside of the restaurant. All the cavalry who had entered the restaurant were drowned in the purple spirit of Lin Feng. Arg! A gigantic purple spirit appeared in the restaurant. All the cavalry of the Condor Castle organization had been swallowed by it. The purple lake that the crowd could see from outside looked like the gigantic mouth of a ferocious beast. When the purple lake started to slowly disperse, the crowd looked at the restaurant. There was no longer any sounds of movement. All those who had entered the restaurant had died. Not a single person had survived. It seems that killing Lin Feng isn't so easy either, thought people in the crowd. A moment before, dozens of cavalry had entered the restaurant and had died in a flash. The vice leader of the Condor Castle organization wasn't attacking. He was afraid Lin Feng was killing everyone who entered the restaurant. Of course, there was another possibility, which was to destroy the restaurant, but if they did, Lin Feng would be covered by the dust and would have a chance to escape. At that moment, Lin Feng appeared at the door of the restaurant. He glanced at the crowd. He looked frivolous and aggressive. "If anyone enters the restaurant, I will kill them," said Lin Feng coldly. Many people remained silent. If they entered the restaurant, Lin Feng would kill them. Lin Feng wasn't a saint. "You want to die," said the vice leader of the Condor Castle organization. A sharp sound emerged in the atmosphere. He jumped up into the air, and he immediately threw himself at the restaurant with incredible speed. He was bursting through the atmosphere at an amazing speed. Lin Feng was smiling coldly. When he saw the vice leader of the Condor Castle organization, his silhouette flickered. He went back into the restaurant and an incredible quantity of purple liquid appeared. "Die!" In a flash, the vice leader of the Condor Castle organization rushed inside the restaurant. His loud shout resonated through the atmosphere. 3 balls of pure qi appeared in the atmosphere and moved in the 3 directions, where Lin Feng, Meng Qing and Ba Dao were. Gotcha! The purple light filled the atmosphere and expanded into every direction. At the same time, a brilliant sword appeared and stopped the pure qi which was approaching. "Humph!" The vice leader of the Condor Castle organization groaned. He released even more pure qi. A dazzling light appeared around his body and he raised his hands. At the same time, the purple liquid was covering his whole body, unable to make his body melt. The vice leader's claw-like hands were moving towards Lin Feng at full speed. But at that moment, the vice leader's heart started to pound. An extremely brutal and cold energy penetrated into his chest, as if it wanted to freeze his inner organs. He abruptly turned and was afraid because he noticed an extremely cold presence. His facial expression drastically changed. His body was shaking. He wanted to leave, but it was already too late. Coldness had already invaded his body. Gotcha! The endless ice energy and the pure qi collided. At that moment, the pure qi was frozen in place. At the same time, some bubbling sounds could be heard. The terrifying purple lake surrounded the vice leader's body. An extremely brutal and violent purple energy started to corrode his body. His facial expression drastically changed. Crack! Ice qi crashed down from the sky. The vice leader of the Condor Castle organization tried to struggle, but the purple lake transformed into a huge dragon, which tightly held him in place. Gotcha! The ice was falling through the atmosphere. It then reached the vice leader's hand, freezing it. Besides that, the ice started to spread all over his body. He looked hopeless and his body was covered by a layer of ice. Arg! The vice leader of the Condor Castle organization gave a horrible shriek when the ice enveloped his body. But it was of no use. He was surrounded by the purple lake. He had no strength to escape. Besides, he was freezing and being corroded. Death was one step away. The vice leader of the Condor Castle organization had broken through to the Shenqi lair, but at that moment, his body was melting and freezing at the same time. He was just waiting to die. That was terrifying. His body started shaking insanely. He didn't want to die. He had come to avenge Tu Jiu. He wanted to kill Lin Feng, but he never thought that he would be killed. Cracking noises spread in the atmosphere. The ice kept invading his body at incredible speed and finally, he was completely frozen. Outside, the crowd was fixedly staring at the Celestial Mountain restaurant. Even though the door of the restaurant was already damaged, it could, as before, prevent the crowd from seeing inside. What was happening inside? A moment before, the vice leader of the Condor Castle organization had entered. Had he killed Lin Feng and his friends? Boom! An explosive sound burst forth. The restaurant of the door was crushed into pieces. A silhouette was blown out of the restaurant. The silhouette fell down onto the ground before the crowd. That person was dead. When the crowd saw that silhouette, they were wondering who it was. They were absolutely dumbstruck. That silhouette was the vice leader of the Condor Castle organization, a cultivator of the Xianqi layer. The vice leader of the Condor Castle organization had died. He had entered the restaurant a short time before and his corpse had already been sent back out. An incredible quantity of cold energy moved towards the remaining members of the Condor Castle organization. The vice leader, just like the others a moment ago, had entered the restaurant and died. The door of the restaurant was a free path to hell. A silhouette moved out of the restaurant. That person looked handsome, but infinite coldness and killing intent were also present in their eyes. If that person wanted to kill, they killed. A purple illusion appeared in front of Lin Feng. It was a huge purple dragon. Lin Feng's silhouette flickered and he jumped into the air. Purple energy emerged from his hand and blocked two silhouettes that were escaping on their horses. A sword light fell from the sky like a meteor. These two silhouettes were immediately blown into the air from the impact and died before hitting the ground. Behind Lin Feng's back, a pure and holy white silhouette appeared. They looked like gods. Many people of the Condor Castle organization had all been frozen and had died. Their horses were not even spared. Besides, at that moment, a silhouette as sharp as a blade appeared and emitted a resplendent light. Any person who found themselves under that blade would die. 3 people had massacred all the members from Condor Castle that had come to the restaurant. There was nobody left. They had no chance to fight back against such overwhelming power. They had all died miserably. The black horses were going insane, galloping around and neighing. Lin Feng and his 2 friends were way too strong. Each of them were monstrously strong. Each time they attacked, someone would die. The black horses were going insane, galloping around and neighing. Lin Feng and his 2 friends were way too strong. Each of them were monstrously strong. Each time they attacked, someone would die. That amazing woman was particularly strong. If anyone got too close to her, they got the impression that they were going to freeze on the spot. She was clearly a cultivator of the Xianqi layer. That man wearing a bronze mask was the weakest of the 3 of them, but he had still broken through to the 7th Lingqi layer. Besides, he could control a shocking amount of blade force. Lin Feng was usually relaxed, carefree and enigmatic, but in any case, he was monstrously strong. Very quickly, outside of the Celestial Mountain restaurant, a mountain of corpses appeared. Apart from a few people who managed to escape early, the others were all dead, just like Tuzhou. They had come in an imposing and domineering fashion, but this would be their final resting place. Including the vice leader of the Condor Castle organization, who was a cultivator of the Xianqi layer. How powerful, thought the crowd when they saw Lin Feng. They could barely believe their eyes. They did not think that Lin Feng and his friends would be that strong, killing each and every single person who dared to enter the restaurant. No wonder he was in no rush to run away. He already had such terrifying strength, which is why he wasn't afraid of any opponents coming to fight him. Lan Zhao's eyes were flashing. She looked at Meng Qing. What a pure and holy-looking woman. She looked so lithe and graceful. She was a rare beauty. Her heart was beating slightly faster when looking at Meng Qing. She wanted to see her face. No wonder that. Her lips vibrated. As if she was thwarted in love, Lan Zhao's heart was filled with hidden bitterness. No wonder she did not manage to seduce Lin Feng. He already had such a beautiful woman at his side. Lin Feng stopped looking at the corpses and immediately went back into the restaurant. Meng Qing and Ba Dao followed him closely. The 3 silhouettes once more disappeared from the crowd's sight. The crowd looked at the restaurant. They had already killed so many people from the Condor Castle organization, including their vice leader. The next people sent from Condor Castle would definitely be even more brutal. What an irresponsible guy. You think that you can rely on the strength of 3 people to defeat the Condor Castle organization? Lan Zhao was cursing at Lin Feng in her heart. Lin Feng surprisingly didn't intend to leave. It seemed like he wanted to annihilate the entire Condor Castle organization, and if he didn't, then he would regret it. Lin Feng was sitting inside the restaurant, his eyes closed as he calmly breathed in and out. He was in fusion with the earth. His heart was in fusion with his body and thus, his heart was also in fusion with the earth itself. Lin Feng, no matter where he was or what the circumstance, could always enter an ideal mental state for cultivation. He was surrounded by pure qi light. A vast quantity of pure qi was unceasingly moving towards Lin Feng's body. At the same time, Lin Feng entered into an ideal state of meditation, emptying his heart and mind. His body was recovering and regaining the vitality which his soul had consumed. Lin Feng could use pure qi. It didn't have too much effect on him, but when he used the strength of his soul, he had to recover quickly because without it, it would impact his fighting ability. When Lin Feng used his purple energy to attack, or made a gigantic dragon appear, he also had to use the strength of his soul. If he didn't have a strong soul, the purple spirit wouldn't be able to leave his body to attack. The stronger his soul was, the farther he could attack using his purple energy. While Lin Feng and his friends were recovering inside of the restaurant, the crowd outside still had not left. They were still looking at the restaurant, waiting for some other people from the Condor Castle organization to come. They wanted to see how this entire story would end. After a while, rumbling noises spread through the atmosphere. The ground started shaking again. That time the ground was shaking even more intensely than last time. The noises were so loud that the people in the crowd had the impression that they were going to become deaf. Very quickly, a gigantic army of black armored horses appeared. It seemed like there were more than 1,000 of them. People's hearts started pounding. Tujio, who was at the peak of the Ling Qi layer, and the vice leader in the Xian Qi layer, had both been killed. 100 other members of the organization had been killed as well. That made all the other members of the Condor Castle organization furious. The whole nest had come out to attack. They are here. The crowd saw the group and moved far away from them. The newcomers were extremely strong. The crowd was too scared to be too close. Attacks might hit them if they were. The one leading them was a bald man. He looked tall and sturdy with a huge scar on his face. He looked monstrous and hideous. A single glance was sufficed to see that he was anything but a saint. The bald man was carrying a broadsword on his shoulder, a deadly qi emerging from his body. He had an impressive bearing and a commanding presence. He was one of the vice leaders of the Condor Castle organization. The great leader and him were the core of the organization. The great leader was the strongest cultivator of the Condor Castle organization. He was mysterious. Very few people had seen him. It was said that a few years ago, he invaded the castle of the organization alone and had made everyone submit to him. He was extremely strong and had broken through to the third Xianqi layer. He had replaced the previous leaders and became the great leader of the organization. The cavalry, on their black horses, were galloping at full speed and they immediately encircled the restaurant. The leader looked at the corpses on the ground and then at the restaurant. His eyes looking bloodthirsty. "Come out!" shouted the leader extremely loudly and aggressively. His voice was so imposing that the windows of the restaurant were shaking. Lin Feng and his friends just ignored him. Why would they willingly come out of the restaurant? That was impossible. The leader's facial expression was sharp and ice-cold. Sounding like a demon, he said, "For having killed my people, I will torture you to death. Everybody stay in position and wait for them to come out, then kill them." "Roger," shouted the cavalry while releasing some deadly qi. The leader didn't have the same plan as the other leader a moment ago. He didn't want to enter the restaurant. He wanted Lin Feng to suffer from fear. But how hard was it going to be for Lin Feng? In the Earth Fusion dimension, his heart stayed focused and he just continued practicing cultivation. His heart was like flowing water. The things around him did not affect the earth and therefore they did not affect him, otherwise why would it be called Earth Fusion? The leader jumped off his horse and walked to the other leader's corpse, an evil facial expression appearing on his face. How cold! The leader's body was frozen and melted. His blood had frozen entirely. His muscles had stopped working. What a powerful ice energy! The leader raised his head and looked at the Celestial Mountain restaurant. He was convinced that the dead leader should have waited for them to arrive before he entered. Even though that leader looked rude and stupid, people close to them all knew that he was much wiser than the leader who died. His aggressiveness and tyranny intrigued people. That person was also much more cold-blooded than the previous leader. He had brought 1,000 people along. He wasn't willing to take risks. Those who were inside the restaurant had killed the other leader, which meant that they were probably strong enough to kill him as well. He didn't feel like gambling with his life. Even though Lin Feng was surrounded by an army of 1,000 men, Lin Feng was too difficult to kill. If the situation was too dangerous, they couldn't afford gambling. They had to be careful and vigilant. Outside of the Celestial Mountain restaurant, the atmosphere was absolutely calm, but it seemed like the situation could explode at any moment. The 1,000 men surrounding the restaurant patiently waiting. Time passed very slowly. The silence in which the atmosphere was drowned was oppressive, but the crowd did not leave. They were standing in the distance, waiting for a battle to start. However, they had just been waiting for a whole day. The troops of the Condor Castle organization had been waiting there for a whole day. They had not attacked, and besides, the crowd had also been there for a whole day as well. It was as if they weren't tired. The atmosphere was, as before, extremely calm. However, at that moment in the distance, a sound emerged in the atmosphere and the ground slightly shook. Besides, that sound was becoming louder and louder, and the ground was shaking more and more violently. Horses were coming, even more people were arriving. The crowd was stupefied. They were looking into the distance, and immediately, they saw a group of snow-white horses moving towards them. The cavalry were dressed in white and were releasing some piercingly cold qi. It seemed like ice and snow were appearing on the ground as they passed by. The people of the Ice and Snow Mountain village have come. The people in the crowd shrank their eyes and guessed who these people were. Bing Yuan, the prodigy of the Ice and Snow Mountain village, had been killed. The Ice and Snow Mountain village was way too strong to ignore such an insult. They're galloping so fast. The crowd was astonished. This time Lin Feng was definitely going to die. The people of the Condor Castle organization and the people of the Ice and Snow Mountain village both had come. They would definitely manage to kill him. "Piss off!" shouted a voice coming from the very front of the cavalry, when he saw that in front of him was the bald leader. The crowd was astonished. The person from the Ice and Snow Mountain village was so aggressive. He was so strong that the bald leader of the Condor Castle organization was not even put in his eyes. The bald leader looked at him and said, "What is your social status within the sect of the Ice and Snow Mountain village to talk to me that way?" "Bing He Tung," said the newcomer, sounding indifferent. The crowd frowned. Bing He Tung had personally come. He was a great elder of the Ice and Snow Mountain village. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.